Hello everyone, welcome to Internally Screening, and you join us for our Oscars 2024 breakdown video. In this, we are going to attempt to give you the definitive one-stop shop on all things the Oscars, not any of the drama that surrounds it, but just about the quality of the films, whether or not they made the right choices, what we would have picked instead, and yeah, basically just give you as much information as our brains can hold at any one time. We watched basically every film that we could for the large majority of categories. The only one we weren't able to get a hold of in time for this video was The Boy and the Heron, which unfortunately, if you didn't know, did go on to win. So we might have slightly leaky knowledge when it comes to that side of things.
And a legitimately amazing selection of films this year, which isn't always the case, not always a given. I think it's probably the strongest Oscars lineup I can remember since I've started caring about film. I don't think there's been a better one.
Yes, I'd need to go back through the years, but it's definitely one of the strongest in recent memory. In my mind, I hope that it kind of heralds the return of film, since we're past COVID now, we're past the pandemic, and like that's, you know, in those sort of shaky early years of the 20s, we've kind of seen some sort of more shaky lineups, and this is...
Especially 2020, where it was just a bit
it was dead. As we go through this list, not only are we going to talk about what we wanted to win, what we think should have won, etc., but we're also going to do some little bite-sized kind of reviews of each film, kind of give a flavour for those of you that might know less about some of them, or if you're just interested in what two nerds from the south of England want to say about them.
So to start things off, we'll go through the Best Picture nominations. So we've got American Fiction, Anatomy of a Fall, Barbie, The Holdovers, Killers of the Flower Moon, Maestro, Oppenheimer, Past Lives, Poor Things, and The Zone of Interest, which we saw all of those.
We did.
So what did you think of American Fiction?
I thought it was a fantastically funny film. A bit of an unusual one for as a nomination, because it kind of feels almost like an inverse of a lot of what the Oscars like to do and pat themselves on the back about inclusivity and kind of...
On the face of it, it's kind of like an Oscars film, because when you hear the concepts, you're like racial politics, an actor who's in Jeffrey Wright, who's been good in a lot of stuff, but has never really got like a big...
Never been given his flowers or anything, and never gotten like a huge central role in something.
But yeah, actually it's just a standard drama comedy film, really, with some sort of deeper themes and meta elements.
Yes, and I think it nails the comedy. Premise-wise, it's so strong. I know it's based off of a book, which I'm now eager to read. Every joke they go for lands, and Jeffrey Wright carries the humour so perfectly.
He's really good.
He's so knowing. It's a really great blend between the dramatic elements. I mean, in terms of tones, not necessarily in terms of quality between the two things, which I know you have something to say about, but I particularly loved, there's a great scene in the middle where sort of the characters of his book start to come to life, and you get a little cameo from Keith David, who is... I just love Keith David so much. He's one of my faves.
Yeah, that was the best scene in the film, and I kind of wish the film leaned more into the meta aspect of the film, because for those unaware, the premise is that basically he writes a book. He's a sort of not down and out, like a critically acclaimed writer, but not commercially successful writer who's written a lot of serious books, and he's frustrated about the fact that a lot of these kind of tepid and cloying black stories that are labelled as black stories for white people to consume and feel bad about as a sort of form of white guilt get all the plaudits, while he, as a black man just writing serious fiction, gets overlooked. And there's a scene where he just decides, you know, I'm going to fucking write a ridiculous book and submit it to my publisher as a joke. And then you have this scene where he's writing and the characters sort of pop up and he's kind of there writing in the background, but the characters are acting out this like sort of parody of that kind of racial drama stuff that you get from, like, you know, some American books. I imagine, I've not read any of them, and it is genuinely really funny. And I loved all that meta stuff about his identity as a black man in America, the expectations on him versus just him as an individual, and what he wants to do and how other writers and his audience perceives him. I loved all of that stuff, but whilst the dramatic side of it, the family drama side of it, is well done, I don't think it really is actively engaging, and kind of feels soap opera-ish at times. Another thing, I guess, a thing that makes it unusual as a nomination is that it's not badly directed, but it's not a film where you really notice the direction.
Yeah, it's much more about the performances and story and comedy of it.
And all the performances are really good.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. It's not a very flashy or sort of interestingly directed film, apart from perhaps the scene we were just talking about. Yeah, I can see your point on the family drama side of things. It's definitely less interesting, but I wonder if that's down to it being slightly autobiographical on the part of the original author, and so it is that contrast between like, here's what people think I am and here's what I actually am, which is just a normal dude with normal family drama.
And I've seen people fall on both sides of the coin. Some people prefer the meta aspect, the sort of racial comedy aspect that I liked, and other people preferred the family drama stuff and actually enjoyed that more sort of somber side of the film. So I don't think I would recommend it.
I adored it. But I agree with you. It's not a.
I'm not mad it didn't win anything.
It's not a filmy film. It has like a very broad appeal, and in that sense, I guess, it is kind of unusual for the Oscars because it's not particularly arty or sort of subtle. Or anything like that. But I think your average Joe and your art film head will both enjoy it.
Your mum will like it.
Your mum will like it, and your edgy cousin will like it.
Yeah. Next film up was Anatomy of a Fall, which was the Cannes Palme d'Or winner this year, starring Sandra Hüller as the main protagonist in a sort of detective. Well, not detective. It's more of a courtroom drama, murder, ? Is it a murder mystery film about a woman whose husband mysteriously dies falling from a window? What do you think of Anatomy of a Fall?
Well, first thing is that Sandra Hüller is an absolute revelation in which she has somehow starred. After having never heard of her before this year, she is now in 2 of the best films of the decade, and also in the best nominations. Sandra Hüller gives this really convincing and like in-depth performance of this kind of frustrated and just tired woman who just is disillusioned with her sort of her family life. Her relationship with her husband is fraying at the edges quite dramatically. She is a successful writer, and he is a very unsuccessful writer who I believe is a teacher as well. Or
he's a writer/teacher. I think they were both teachers. Right. The film,
And basically, the kind of the core drama between the 2 characters is that they, one has been able to be successful and the other isn't. She's living away from home in France, which is his native land, so she feels kind of detached and like almost punished for her success. And they live in this sort of snowy cabin up near the Alps somewhere. And then, in the midst of all of that backdrop of marital tension, the husband falls from the top story of their cabin. And the question is, did he do it himself or did she do it? And there's this really uneasy quality to her performance in that she never really, in spite of all of her assertions that she didn't do it, is convincing in either way. Like her reservations about her marriage bleed into the nature of like the courtroom investigation in like a really exciting and interesting way.
I think it's not only one of the best scripts of the year. It might actually just be the best script of the year, in my opinion, that I've seen. In my opinion, super accessible. Like anybody can watch this and enjoy it because it's got that tension thriller factor to it.
That procedural backdrop.
Yeah, exactly. But also maintains enough ambiguity and performance focus in Sandra Hüller, the amazing child actor who plays her son, the lawyer who's great, the barrister, the French barrister, who is my favourite movie hater
What
of the
the
year.
fuck was his problem?
My mini award for best movie hater of the year goes to that bull fraud.
I love that. We were watching it and being like, is this how French court goes?
I know.
Who the fuck are these guys? What are they doing? Like,
I loved it. It basically does exactly what it needs to do, like exceptionally well at all times. I barely have any flaws with it. It would rank really, really highly amongst my favourite films of the year.
For sure.
And for a director as well, who I believe this is maybe her like 3rd or 4th film. Okay. So not a super, and a lot of her previous films were like really small budget films. This is a crazy step up. I'm going to have to go and check out her previous stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Really, really wonderfully directed film. I'm kind of gutted it didn't really win anything, but it's difficult to argue with the stuff that has won. So
yeah, it was always going to be a tough one, given that it's sort of bilingual or trilingual as a film. You know, to win over the American
and an amazing ending as well.
Yes. Oh yeah. I mean, I think it's nice that it got nominated in a year when Oppenheimer came out, it was going to be tough for anything to really get in a word in edgeways.
Absolutely,
so, yeah.
Moving on next, we probably have the most controversial nomination, if there was one, with some very minor controversies about who should have been nominated for what regarding this film. It's the first half of the Barbenheimer phenomenon from the summer. It's Barbie, directed by Greta Gerwig, starring Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling. What do you think of Barbie?
Well, I liked it. I think it's one of the weaker offerings in this list, but that said, as we've acknowledged, this list is incredibly strong. And it's kind of interesting that a film of its ilk is nominated in that it's a sort of big franchise type film. But obviously, as everyone who's watched Barbie it is by no means just a franchise film. I mean, all I just think of is Ryan Gosling. Like he's
sexist pig.
I know, but like he does steal the film. It's a very interesting story in so much as like obviously, you know,
it's amazing that they pulled it off, because in concept, a Barbie film, you roll your eyes, right?
Yeah, and the thing with it, right, is that obviously everyone on the right wing cried about how woke it was. Oh, they're talking about feminism. But what was interesting about it, and you know, I guess what makes it appeal as broadly as it did, is that it doesn't just go, oh, women are the only people that suffer from patriarchy. Men suffer from patriarchy, and so like the exploring the toxic masculinity and how like people who are like more easily led can be kind of fed this illusion or like lie about power. And
there are sections of Barbie that I think are genuinely exceptional and like really, really, really good. Particularly sort of like the opening 20 minutes. Some of the parts towards the end, I think there are moments in the film where it kind of lets itself down. There's like a scene where one of the characters, who we'll probably come to later because it's relevant to one of the other nominations, basically just does a monologue at the screen explaining like the themes of the film, which was a big letdown, because what the first part of the film did so beautifully was really clearly communicating everything that she said, but without having to just say it to the screen.
Say it out loud.
Yeah, and what Greta Gerwig has done to make the meta element of it, because I'm personally quite sick of meta stuff in films and meta filmmaking. The way it was done was so like genuinely funny for a start, and also quite insightful and clever. I think that element of the film is really strong. I do think like as a kind of blockbuster, it kind of falls into the trappings of like, other modern blockbusters in like having to have this huge sort of final blowout and explain itself a lot. But it has lots of really, really good elements, so I'm not really mad at
a large proportion of its final blowout was a big song and dance number, which was great, I do love.
Yeah, it is great.
You know, that's a bit of a retro throwback. You know, get a big song in, and
good soundtrack.
And yeah, the soundtrack's sick, and Ryan Gosling, you know, delivers.
He does just steal the show.
He steals the show. That song at the end is amazing. I'm just Ken. Slaps. The choreography and the sort of set changing, the costume changing is all great. But he is just one of the funniest bastards on the planet.
He's so funny.
We've known he's been funny from films like The Nice Guys, but this was just a different level.
Perfect casting, really. And Margot Robbie I thought was excellent.
She's great in it,
Like, she really is the also perfect casting.
Perfect casting, undoubtedly.
Yeah, I don't think there was really any bad casting in the film. I even kind of enjoyed Will Ferrell's weird cameo.
Well, it basically is the same character exactly from the
Lego movie. Yeah, that's true, yeah.
Which, that works.
I do think maybe too much has been, like, the initial reaction to Barbie was so enthusiastic that it ended up sort of expectations were raised so high that it's kind of seen, I think, a little bit of pushback maybe from some sort of film circle people, where it's like, oh, is it really that good?
Yeah.
And it never really was, apart from one other film on this list. It's probably the weakest of the bunch.
Yeah,
but it's still an incredibly impressive film to be able to do that, because I do think the concept is really difficult to hammer out, and they just kind of nailed it.
It is a very fun, very well made summer blockbuster. One,
that has something to say as well.
Something to say that's unique, visually interesting, full of like captivating performances, great comedy. It's just not at the sort of upper echelon that so many of the rest of these films were, and just because something is a really good blockbuster doesn't necessarily make it an Oscar-worthy movie.
Yeah, agreed.
So that's kind of where I fall on it.
Next up is The Holdovers, directed by Alexander Payne, starring Paul Giamatti, which is a sort of throwback. Even the trailer, I don't know if you saw the trailer. Yeah, the trailer.
In a world.
Yeah, brings back the trailer voice guy, and it very much feels like a sort of throwback to those kind of 90s films that would be character-driven, funny but deep, kind of like Good Will Hunting or Dead Poets Society.
Exactly.
Type stuff with a lot of young actors in it. Basically, a bunch of students who go to a private school, boarding school rather, and then everybody goes off on summer holidays. But there's some people who don't really have anywhere to go, whether it be for their family's just on another holiday, and there's nothing wrong there. Whereas for some of the other kids, there's an upset family life at play, and the film kind of goes into that. What did you make of The Holdovers?
Fucking phenomenal. It's teetering on a 9 out of 10, like between an 8 and a 9 at the moment. I do really want to watch it again. Paul Giamatti is amazing, and I'm annoyed at myself that I haven't seen enough of his films that I can kind of compare and go, I can't really say, oh yeah, Paul Giamatti, he's so good. Like I've seen all of his films.
He's always been a great supporting actor.
Yeah, but I've seen if I'm being honest, I've seen like 2 of his films.
I think I've seen him in loads of stuff, but he just tends to be a background character and never a main character.
Sadly, the only other film that springs immediately to mind is The Lady in the Water.
Oh God,
Jesus Christ, sorry mate. I know you're better than that, and this is proof. Yeah, his performance is this like really down and out sort of jaded teacher who just loves kind of like laying into his like coddled teenagers who have just got this like these charmed existences. He really wants to put them in their place, but has this knowledge that he's never really going to achieve anything because they'll just go on and be super successful. Ends up being paired off with, I forget the actor's name,
the young kid, Dominic Secker or something like that. Yeah,
he is fucking unreal.
Yeah, for a debut performance, he was really, really fantastic.
He should have been in amongst the best supporting stuff.
I think so, yeah.
And the best supporting actor was probably one of the strongest of all of these.
It's tough to put someone out of that.
So, yeah, agreed on that. But I'm going to say it again, what a revelation. What a revelation. Like, genuinely, like, the chemistry they have together is so strong, so powerful, and genuinely like so emotionally captivating. Like the setup for the story is fairly simple, but it really is just like watching these two people interact with one another and just have this like sort of blossoming kind of familial patriarchal relationship with one another.
It's a very low-key film. Like it's never super funny or ridiculously sad, and it's kind of like a hangout movie in a way, like where you just have these characters. Like it does have really sad moments and it does have really funny moments, but you know what I mean? It's not got like I wouldn't really call it a comedy.
No, it's like like you say, comedic tinged, like comedy flavored, but
yeah, and it definitely starts off funnier and then gets a bit more somber towards the end.
Sure.
As like more is revealed about characters. I probably wasn't as keen on it as you were, but it is just a really good film. Number one, it's another good Christmas film to add to the canon. It's like an actually good Christmas film.
Sure. With kind of values that really do tie over into like Christmas film territory.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's not just like, I mean, Die Hard. Everyone likes to throw out Die Hard as the
It's not really a Christmas film, though, is it?
But like a lot of the messaging in it really doesn't.
This actually feels like a Christmas film.
It has like the Christmas filmy message, like It's a Wonderful Life.
It's like, actually it's about quite heartwarming.
Yeah, it's about like don't give up on people. Like family matters, and like just try and live your best life. That kind of shit. Like really wholesome, but done in like handled in like a really expert way.
Yeah,
real sincerity.
Again, not super flashy direction or anything like that. Pretty standard. It's got like a beautiful sort of film grainy quality to it. I think I don't know if they filmed it on like a certain camera or with a certain type of film or whatever, but it has like, it really does kind of capture that retro feel.
Because it's not flashy, but it feels like it was made then, and like the attention to detail to allow that and enable that to happen, like in every sense, like like you say, like the film grain, but the set design, the sound design, like it all just works together really wonderfully.
Yeah, really good film. Next up, we have Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Robert De Niro, Lily Gladstone, and about a million other cameos. Random people. Jesse Plemons, who, I like when he shows up in pretty much anything. It is 3.5 hours. It was obviously controversial. The Academy seemed to only nominate Scorsese at this point through gritted teeth, because I think he's had like a ridiculous number of nominations at this point without winning a single one, which is pretty impressive. I think the last time he won was The Departed, which is kind of crazy, but whatever. So Killers of the Flower Moon obviously is a story based on a book about the Osage Nation, and it's about this kind of twisted scheme around them as a people, because they happen to own some land that had a lot of fucking oil on it, which as you can see where that's going straight away. What did you think of that?
Robert De Niro is the coldest motherfucker in this film. He's so evil, but it's
ridiculously
evil.
evil.
Great. I mean, I haven't seen The Irishman yet, but it was really satisfying to just see him getting his teeth into like a nasty fucking character again. In his older age, he's taken some sort of softer things, some comedies that no one.
It's great to see an actor like that just still has it, like 100%.
Yeah, just like pulls it out of the back pocket every now and then, just to remind the little whippersnappers to be put in their place. Yo, sit the fuck down. I mean, Leo's great in the film. It didn't help that I watched this at the point in time where everyone kept talking about how Leo dates like 25-year-old girls. So I was constantly just thinking, like, watching him, like, you fucking piece of shit. You fucking... So like I had to kind of keep trying to stop distracting myself and focus on his performance. Because yeah, he does a really good job as this like sort of idiotic stooge.
He plays a really complex character in this, Leonardo DiCaprio, and I think I can't wait to rewatch it because his character is a lot more layered than I think it seems on first watch, because I came away really thinking about his character. And I'm a big fan of him in this film, and I think, I know a lot of people don't like this, but it definitely could be shorter. Equally, I don't know what it would be that I would cut out, so I'm not sure. But I do think that the film essentially sticks the landing, because I think the final scene with him and Lily Gladstone is like amazing, and the film has a really sort of strange sort of epilogue as well, which I thought was quite interesting and really sad. I mean, it is kind of the feel bad film of the summer, like really depressing.
It is, but it's told in like a very kind of approachable way. Like, I didn't feel those 3.5 hours whatsoever. Like, people are complaining about it's too long. Just need to watch more long films. Just get a fucking grip. Like, it was a really fucking well-made film. Scorsese always makes long films, and he always makes them work. They're always fucking great, and they're always fucking interesting all the way through. Like, I'm not telling that man to trim the fat. Like, it was about like really important shit, and like each phase of the film felt as important as the last. You know,
I do think that I quite enjoy long films. So personally,
a long film that justifies itself.
I could see that maybe you could cut stuff down, because there were certainly points where the film felt like it was picking up pace and then sort of slowed down where maybe it didn't really need to.
Okay.
But I kind of enjoyed sort of basking in the film, and like it was very atmospheric in a way that The Irishman and Silence weren't really.
Okay.
And I think it's really interesting as well, because Scorsese's sort of late career, he's kind of taken a whole different approach on films where his films have always had a sort of dark edge to them, obviously, but his last 3 films have all been really, really depressing character studies. I think The Irishman is probably one of the most depressing films I've ever seen, and this isn't quite as good as that, in my opinion, just in its sort of methodical layers of depression upon depression upon depression, where it's like, this really sucks for this guy. But it does do a really wonderful job of telling this story that I feel like most people didn't know about, right?
No, for sure.
And I think Lily Gladstone, who we'll probably come to, it gives a really interesting, different kind of performance.
Very reserved, very like...
So reserved. But I think she's doing a lot more than some people are saying.
Yes, and I think that's something I would probably benefit from on a rewatch, because I mean, lots of people were championing her for Best Actress, and I was like, yeah, but has she really done enough in the film? Like, not saying that she hasn't done enough, but like, is the character like present enough?
I would actually agree. We can get to her, I guess, but I know exactly what you mean.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, that doesn't take away from the strengths of the film in that it all fits so well. Like, the pieces all align in a really neat and interesting way. I saw someone say that it kind of it was basically assembled like one of his mob films, and initially I was kind of like, whatever. Like, stop trying to paint Scorsese into a corner, but it kind of does, but in a way that's...
It's like a really dark twist on that.
Yeah, and in a way that makes that formula and structure fresh. In a completely different context, in a context you would never even think to put one. Yeah,
it kind of takes a film like, I think you can compare it to films like Casino and Goodfellas, but those films are like 2 of my favourite films, or don't get me wrong, but there's certainly, you know, an aspect to that film where it's like, these are fucked up dark characters, but you are kind of rooting for them in the film.
Yes.
And it kind of takes that template and makes you think like, well, should you really be rooting for these people?
Yeah.
Like, look at how it's been done here with this Robert De Niro.
Yeah, where there's a romanticism to the Italian mobsters of New York and Las Vegas. It's like, this is like, no, this is fucked up.
Yeah,
and it never implies it isn't. fucked up.
Yeah.
You're horribly aware of everything happening.
One more thing before we move on from it. I think it has some really amazing editing, and it has some probably one of the best scenes of the year in my opinion, in the scene where Leo is kind of nursing Lily Gladstone's character, and you have that really weird kind of eerie shot of the fire outside with the sort of silhouettes on the fire. There was just like, I don't know, I can't quite describe what it was about that scene, but it was really off-putting in a way that I don't think a film made me feel that way this year. I do think there are faults with it. I think, like I said, I do think it possibly could have been trimmed in some parts, not to cut the fat like you said, but just to maintain a sense of momentum that I think it loses at points. And there are probably some technical things here and there that I could probably change. I can't recall off the top of my head, but still an amazing film, especially for a director as old as he is.
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to the greats that are still with us, there's no question. Like, he's been so consistent throughout his career, and it's just it's a pleasure to still see him.
Yeah, I hope we get a few more out of him. But he could probably retire, and he'd have a stake to the claim of being the best director to ever do it.
Yeah. I'd probably do that. I'd probably go there. Yeah.
Next up, we have Maestro, the most recent film from Bradley Cooper, starring Bradley Cooper, about Leonard Bernstein, the orchestra conductor.
Yes.
This. Well, I'll let you go first.
This is the worst film in this list.
Yes, it is. By a long way. And by the way, before we go into hating on this, we both like Bradley Cooper as an actor. Right? I actually love him as an actor.
He's a talented director.
Yeah, because A Star Is Born, rewatched it last year. It's still a great film. Actually super underrated in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And I think there's a lots of elements of this film that work really well. I think this film is beautiful.
Really well shot,
I think they nail the black and white stuff. It's so gorgeous in those sections, and obviously it's still into the color sections. The tone and atmosphere of it is nailed. Like, I feel like you do get the sense of the sincerity that, I mean, lots of the talking points around the making of the film is, you know, he studied and he lived in Leonard Bernstein's shoes for however many years and all this stuff. But it's like, I get that. I can feel the reverence for it, but it's fucking boring.
It's so boring. I actually don't. It's been a long time since I've actually seen a film this boring. There's actually one film on this list that was comparably boring, and even that probably wasn't quite as boring, despite being a worse film overall.
Okay.
It's just a really bad film. And it is probably the closest to Oscar bait of all the films on this list.
Yeah.
I wouldn't quite call it Oscar bait. I do think there's like legitimate artistic passion
and execution.
And execution here. I think Bradley Cooper is good in this film. I think there are points in his performance where it feels a little bit like a parody. And maybe not, I don't know. Like, he's a great actor, but I don't think this is his best, and the makeup is certainly questionable. Carey Mulligan is just great in everything. She's great in it here. But the film kind of tells what must be a really interesting story. I know nothing about Leonard Bernstein. Feels like it tells it in the most boring way possible.
This is the issue with it, in that it's one of those films where you take like this really interesting, complex figure from history, and you kind of do everything in your power to avoid telling the really interesting parts of his story. Like, really getting into the nitty gritty of the fact that he had several sort of gay love affairs while like married, and like, you know, he had this kind of
like the drug habit stuff.
Yeah, like these sorts of like troubled sides to him, or like things that were portrayed or like
but you know what the
felt
big
in his
problem
life as trouble.
The big problem is most people, and I imagine you're probably in the same camp here, watching this film, I don't come out any the wiser of how important is a conductor and what is the art of like conducting. Like,
sure.
Like, I feel like this film should have maybe like not explained that, but like it was clearly something he was incredibly passionate about. And most people who go to watch this film probably don't know what a conductor really does.
Yeah.
And it's very important to the film.
Yeah, if you want a crash course in that shit, watch Tar. From like a year or two ago.
It has got a lot of Tar comparisons. Very different films.
The comparison is basically just that it's around similar fields of work. Like, the characters are very different people, but you know, I guess there's similar sort of controversies around them. It's kind of like heavy-handed and also very soft touch at the same time. It's like, oh, look at this thing he did. Oh, but we're not really going to talk about it that much. Like I said,
scenes just go on and on and on.
I said that the film clearly has reverence for this man's history, but that doesn't really prevent the fact that Bradley Cooper feels very cartoonish in the portrayal of Leonard Bernstein, in so much as like this sort of clearly very focused attempt to really copy all of his mannerisms and his way of speaking and all this actually caricaturizes him instead. And knowing very little about Bernstein, I was just constantly like, did he really talk like this? Is this really what he was like? Like, I don't care how accurate that is to the real world, because what you end up doing in the film is just taking me out of it, making me feel like it's fake. Because there's often stories said of, say, like procedural dramas like CSI, right? Oh, we went through real case files to find these stories, but we had to take the bits out that were too ridiculous. Like, sometimes real life is sillier than film. And sometimes the real aspects of a character or a person can feel too much, like too outlandish. And so for the layman like me, who doesn't know a fucking thing about this guy, I was just like, why are you doing this comedy impression of someone? It even bled a little bit into Carey Mulligan's performance as well. It mostly just the accent, like she was still very good and very convincing, very emotive, but just all the voices just kept dragging me straight out of each scene.
Yeah, I think the film, it's a real fucking drag. There's no two ways about it. But I think it probably gets slightly better towards the end. There was some interesting stuff about his daughter, like not knowing he was gay. And there's like this scene where she's like, "Oh, it's not true, is it, Dad? You're not blah 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 blah." And there's some kind of interesting moments there. And like, there's a death later in the film that has some like really well executed scenes that are sort of, you know, quite emotional. But for the most part, the film really kind of just trundles on. And like, there's some good scenes here and there. It's like, wow, they've done that in a really great way. Like the trailer shot where he's doing that performance or whatever, like, so it's well done, and like clearly the performance is there and it covers some interesting stuff, but it just feels like every scene in the film just sort of goes on that a little bit too long. It's like, why are we hovering on this moment? And I just don't really feel like the film gives me a reason to be invested and care about what it is that's going on.
And we were talking about momentum with Killers of the Flower Moon. I feel like this, like you know, it's
a crash course in how not to do it.
It just kind of plods, and it kind of, oh, there's something interesting. Oh no, okay, it's gone. Oh, there's something interesting.
And he's also like, he's already really successful right at the start of the film. And then by the end of the film, he's still really successful. And you don't really get much of a journey. The film just feels like a plateau.
The journey to me should really be about their marriage, which is purportedly what the film is about. And yet, like, the whole thing about him having gay love affairs whilst in a supposedly heterosexual marriage is never really kind of talked about beyond the fact that they have arguments about. Like,
and it only really comes in later in the film anyway.
It's like, you need to stop doing this thing. You need to stop being like a shit husband, or like, there's never really this kind of moment of like, oh, you need to come clean about who you really are, or like, it never really discusses, like, his sexuality is clearly such a huge important part of like what the film is trying to tell about his life, as well as about his life, or at least that's what I can gather. And yet it's kind of like, here it is, and we're not going to talk about it in any depth.
But it's one single source of conflict that remains the same source of conflict throughout the film, and then doesn't really change. Like, she gets slightly more annoyed about it at points, and then, spoilers, she dies, and that's kind of it.
Well, my mum asked an interesting question in that my mum and dad know about Leonard Bernstein, they're interested in it, and when I told them the film wasn't very good, they were quite disappointed. But one thing my mum asked me about was like, oh, yeah, their marriage, they were more like friends, weren't they? It was like a marriage of friendship rather than a romantic love. And I was like, that's a really interesting question. If only this film could have provided me with those answers to your question, because I have no fucking clue. And I was like, wow, you've just given me like a way, like, that is the root question that like the film should be answering. That should be everything this is built around. Is this man living a lie, or is he really truthfully in love with this woman who is his muse?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah,
just a missed opportunity, really, because there's so much going for it. I will say one nice thing about the film before. I've been ranting. I've been raving. In the black and white sections at the very beginning, the first time they meet and they have this kind of date, where they're at a party and they kind of split off and they go to the theatre owned by her father, and they have this tender moment at the theatre. It's really well shot, really well framed. The construction of all of it, and there's a really tender,
really beautiful lighting in this film.
Yes, really beautiful lighting, and a really tender moment between the two of them where I was like, wow, the sincerity here is palpable. It's like the connection is great. It never created a moment like that or maintained that sensation, and I was like, that's gutting, because that's such a good scene.
Yeah, so a bit disappointing, Maestro. Next up, we've got Oppenheimer. I assume everybody who's watching this video at this point has probably seen Oppenheimer. It's obviously Christopher Nolan. It's about the guy who made the nuke, starring Cillian Murphy, blah, 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 blah. For me, this was the best film of the year, so I'm glad it won. What did you think of Oppenheimer?
It wasn't my best or favourite film of the year, but it was fantastic. Yeah, like Cillian Murphy dissolves into the role of Oppenheimer in a way that you just stop seeing Cillian Murphy entirely.
Yeah.
This is a great example on how to really explore the nuances and the dirty corners of the character in a way that's like both picking him apart but also humanizing in a way that's initially seemed very difficult to me, because, you know, only having known the name Oppenheimer in conjunction with what he did and the "I am become death, destroyer of worlds" quote, it's like, how do you tell the story of this man that is inherently so controversial? And obviously a large proportion of the film is dedicated to the, you know, the kind of procedural of like, well, we need to make a bomb. How do we make the bomb? But the more interesting and riveting part to me is everything around that, and like the courtroom stuff afterwards, where he really has to defend who he is to the world, even if it's over something as spurious as connections to the Communist Party. I've heard a lot of, you know, criticism around this film being like, oh, as soon as the Trinity test sequence is over, the film gets really fucking boring. I'm like, no. Honestly, for me, that's when the film gets even better. Yeah. Not that bit before isn't good.
I mean, I obviously love both parts. What it does is, you made a good point about like, it explores the character of Oppenheimer in like a kind of exhaustive way, in a way that's really interesting. But crucially, unlike Maestro, where it's like, this is just a film about Leonard Bernstein, but never really actually digs into like who he was. This film, it's really about Oppenheimer, and it like explores a lot of facets of like his hypocrisies and like his faults, and, you know, how brilliant he was in his own way, and like his complex motivations for what he was doing on specific things, and his political allegiances and all this kind of stuff. Really gives you like a really thorough picture of that. It's ultimately not just about Oppenheimer. It's also about a lot of things. It's obviously a commentary on the superpowers in the world and what their motivations are, and specifically is, I think, like really critical of like American imperialism in how it's panned out, and like the Americans during the Cold War. And I think it takes a really an incredibly exhaustive and like, you know, a fittingly scientific approach to how do we take this character, like blow up his life and show like everything in it, pun not intended, and like, and also somehow create really intense scenes and incredibly powerful and kind of distressing and depressing and amazing, and also kind of funny bits in it as well. I was absolutely blown away by it, and I think basically what you just have is just loads and loads, like a lot of Chris Nolan movies, like The Dark Knight is like a common saying. It's like, well, The Dark Knight is a good film because it's just like one great scene after another. Right. And I feel like Oppenheimer is kind of like that too. But it has these like real crescendos, and there's two obvious ones. Obviously, the Trinity test is like an amazing sequence, I think. Like the way, obviously you know exactly what's going to happen, but you have this amazing music to go with it. The way they're building up with all these like little details that you know are probably all super accurate because it's Chris Nolan, and this like amazing photography. And then when it happens, it's like, you know, genuinely quite eerie. But then my personal favourite scene, and I imagine if you were saying you like the second half of the film more, you'll probably agree with this, is the sort of crescendo of the clearance, the FBI security clearance thing, where you have Jason Clarke,
the investigation,
and you have that sequence where, first off, there's a song in the soundtrack called Kitty Comes to Testify, and it starts with Emily Blunt's character coming up and finally, you know, saying her side of the story, which is a really great moment, because there's this point where she like, you think she's kind of choking, and Jason Clarke sort of is like kind of mocking her, and I'm trying to find, he thinks he smells blood in the water. Yeah, exactly. And then she like snaps into it, and it's like she gives a really powerful account. And then it comes to Oppenheimer next, and you have this, the music is just so good, you just have to listen to that song, it's amazing. And then you come to the bit with Oppenheimer, and you have this sort of abstract-ish scene where you have these sounds that have been recurring throughout the whole film of the like stamping feet. You have the sort of overexposure out of the window. Of like the bomb. And it's like building up, and the editing, it's just like genuinely one of the most intense things that I've seen this year. On top of that, and I think probably, I just said that was my favourite scene. My actual favourite scene is the speech scene, which I think is probably just my favourite scene in any film this year. The scene where he goes up and gives the speech to the students. You have the sound drop out, and you have like, it's just probably one of the most disturbing things Christopher Nolan's ever directed. Amazing sound design, great music, Cillian Murphy smashes it. And did you know the girl in that scene whose skin is coming off is Chris Nolan's daughter?
He's no longer content with having his wife killed off in every film. He's now trying to off his daughter as well.
Yeah, it's a great in the canon of women married to intense men have a bad time.
Yeah, man. Yeah, we haven't even mentioned how good Robert Downey Jr. is.
Yeah, amazing.
As the sort of
like genuinely
counterpoint.
Transforms as well, because I did not see Robert Downey Jr. for long stretches of that film. Like,
yeah,
great makeup.
Yes,
really amazing makeup in this film.
Yeah. Robert Downey Jr., even though he's playing a hateful piece of shit, still somehow super charismatic, and I liked him even though I wanted to punch him in the face.
Yeah.
So yeah, what a film.
I loved it. My favourite film.
Deserving of its status as kind of like movie moment of the year.
Yeah.
You know?
We both predicted it was going to win, right?
We did.
We both predicted it was going to win. It was going to win. So we're 1-1 right
We're
now.
1-1.
Yeah. Next up, we have Past Lives, directed by Celine Song. This is another one of the most acclaimed films of the year. What did you think of Past Lives?
I thought it was beautiful, and I think the last few films we've talked about have been very sort of big and large in life. This is a much more quiet, probably maybe the quietest film on this list. It's a real interesting study in terms of.
It's very much like a sort of A24 film.
Yes, it is, and it's a study of like the kind of existential and crisis of identity that goes through the minds of people who are expatriates into a country and where they've lived for a long time. So, you know, our main character grew up in South Korea and then moves to America, but she finds herself inevitably split between those two places. And it was a really insightful look into that kind of mindset and the lives of people in those situations, having, you know, no kind of real context for that, an experience of that myself, and you know, that's told through the lens of this essentially autobiographical story about her being in love with two different men from the two different sides of her life, the American and the Korean, and kind of having to make that choice of like, where does she want to go, forwards or backwards, or like what does she deem to be forwards and backwards?
I guess the question kind of is she actually in love with that guy, or it's like the film kind of explores whether, you know, she actually has like feelings for this guy, or whether it's like a pang of nostalgic, like
it's what he represents.
What could have happened in another life?
Yes.
Because, you know, in life there are people that you come across where, like, you know, you feel like, oh, if just this one thing went differently, like my whole life could have been so different. So it's really relatable on that front, I think. Yeah.
And I think the fact that it is, I can kind of tell it's autobiographical given like the.
If you just look up her life on Wikipedia.
Yeah, well, I mean that, but the fact that it's just
full of those details.
The detail, the heart. I love the performances. I forget the name of the lead actress, but she is amazing.
She was good, yeah. All three of the performances I thought were really good.
Yes, they all.
Because
they
there
are
were essentially
really good.
three.
Actually, yes,
actors
the
in the film,
American guy. You say he might be my favorite because he has to do such a difficult, through gritted teeth, like, "Hi, it's lovely to meet you."
He's put in like his character's super interesting because he's put in this really awkward situation where he's kind of being fucked over.
He's been completely fucked over.
He's being really nice about it, and you can tell that she also knows that it's not quite right.
And there's like a moment I was really rooting for.
Like all of three of the characters are essentially nice people who know that it's not right.
Yeah. They're drawn inexorably towards one another. It's this really unfair where someone in this situation has to lose. Maybe all of them, who knows? And it's like a really awkward and frustrating thing to be in the positions of these characters, and so there's the film doesn't give you any easy options of like, oh, I need to root for this person, I should root for this person, because no sooner do you choose a side than you feel incredibly guilty towards the other party. So yeah, I just thought it was a really well balanced, beautiful, romantic drama.
There's a really steady direction behind it that feels really, really well thought out. Obviously, I think this film is very personal to the filmmaker, so I think often with those kind of films, there's a kind of level of precision and detail you can get with someone telling that exact story that clearly relates so much to their life. It didn't really hit me on an emotional level in a way that I think it has for a lot of other people, but I can completely understand why a lot of people are really head over heels for this film. I think like the closest comparison I can think is maybe something like Her.
I was thinking that,
yeah. Where you get that kind of similar sort of melancholic, unrequited love type vibe, if you like. That, like Her is, I think, in my view, well, it's literally one of my like top 5 films of all time, so I'm incredibly biased there. So it's not as good as that, which is not really a criticism of the film. It just didn't really quite get me on that emotional level, but I completely understand. I think it's really, really well made, really, really well acted. It just didn't quite, didn't do it for me.
That's fair.
Which is one of those kind of intangibles where it's like, I can see it's great, but it just didn't do it for me.
And that's completely understandable. And I think when a film kind of revolves so heavily around that kind of connection, that is kind of often can live or die off of that kind of that unspoken X factor.
It still felt relatable to me, so I know that if I had an experience like those characters, like I immediately kind of understood the nuances of the dynamic that they were in, because the film communicates it so well.
Yes.
But it would probably be more powerful to someone who even has like some kind of tangential situation where, I don't know, I've obviously never been an immigrant, so I don't know what that's like, or I've never been in that kind of love triangle, so. But it was a really, really well made film, I think, so yeah. Next up, we have the new Yorgos Lanthimos film, Poor Things, starring Emma Stone, Willem Dafoe, Mark Ruffalo. Again, a real selection, a really beautiful cast in this film, and it is an adaptation. Is it of a novel of the same name?
It is.
Yeah, and it sort of covers. I don't really know where to begin in describing what happens in this film. Essentially, it's a film about a woman who kills herself while pregnant. And then a mad doctor finds her, takes the brain out of the baby and puts it in her. And then it's about that woman's life and what she is. So I guess it's a retro sci-fi Victorian comedy horror film.
Yes.
Just to sum it up succinctly. AKA, it is a Yorgos Lanthimos film.
It is a postmodernist feminist retelling of Frankenstein.
Yes, yeah.
And yeah, I studied this book in university, which is Rogue, and I actually did a degree in literature in spite of having read all of 5 books in my entire life. And this is one of them, so that's nice. But yeah, I was very pleasantly surprised to hear that this was coming out because I had no idea I'd ever encountered this.
And we're both big Yorgos fans as well.
Big Yorgos fans. I've really enjoyed everything he's done. This is now my new favourite Yorgos Lanthimos film, and this is my film of the year. I fucking adore this film. I think in terms of adapting the material, it does it as best in the best possible way I think it could have, and imagines these vivid worlds and sort of reimagined locations, like they go to Lisbon and they're in London, and it kind of transforms them in such a way. When they're in Paris,
steampunk, weird pastel.
In some ways, it's almost like certain things are miniaturized and then rescaled, so it's like you're living in like a tiny version of something that's been blown back up.
It feels like a fantasy film.
It's very fantastical, sort of magical realism.
Alice in Wonderland shit.
Yes. It's basically a sort of breaking down of how in different walks of life and in different social situations, men will try and control women in different ways, and uses the lens of a grown woman, physically grown woman, with the brain of a child to kind of heighten the ridiculousness of the situations, in so much as in being a child, they inherently question the world more readily and frequently.
But because she's in an adult body, she is immediately put into situations and dynamics that a child wouldn't be, and so experiences the world in like a completely unique way.
And it almost in fast forward.
Yes, exactly,
as a consequence.
And has a very sort of skewed perspective on things as a result as well. Yeah.
So very quickly, anyone who says this film promotes paedophilia is a fucking moron and needs to like reevaluate everything in their lives.
Well, media literacy is at an all-time low, I think.
It is true. If you don't understand that message about this film, maybe best to give films a miss.
It's just the licorice pizza argument all over again. It's like, can a film be about something? That's the question.
Oh, yeah.
And, some people's answer to that, unfortunately, these days is just, no, a film cannot be about something.
I can't believe Saw is pro-murder. The people that made the Saw films are pro-torture, violent death.
I know.
I think, that argument frustrated me no end. The film is beautifully made, beautifully constructed on every single element.
It's also, I think, the funniest film of the year.
It's so funny. Yeah, I would put American Fiction up in terms of like the two competing for it. This to me is a stone cold 10 out of 10 experience.
Fair, yeah.
Emma Stone has the unenviable task of essentially having to do a simple Jack.
Yeah.
In that, if you fuck this up, you are gonna make you're gonna look like a complete idiot and make yourself look ridiculous. And instead, she does like this really great gradual transition through womanhood and into adulthood. Her physical acting is on point. At the beginning of the film,
some amazing dance sequences.
Yeah,
the big one in the middle is like genuinely hilarious.
Yes.
You know, where they're like at the hotel lobby and they have like the dance scene with Mark Ruffalo. It's just
and it turns into a fight. And I mean, you should talk about Mark Ruffalo because I know you love him in
Mark
this.
Ruffalo in this film is just absolutely sensational. He's so funny. I love his character. There's a scene where he's stood outside like a hotel or house that she's in, and he just goes, ah, ah, and he like pulls a bit of his hair out and goes, ah, and it's like he just there are points in this film where he just like makes noises or just goes like, oh, he's doing this like bizarre English accent.
It is so
he honestly
weird.
was hilarious. Obviously Emma Stone is the star of the show, steals the show. But I loved Mark Ruffalo in this film. And what I love about Yorgos Lanthimos films, it's not my favourite Yorgos Lanthimos film, but that would be the favourite, but is immediately, very good. This is immediately sort of up there amongst them. Because what I love about his films is they have this really strange sense of humour that kind of feels like really dry. Like The Lobster is an obvious example because everybody sort of talks in, part of the premise of that film is just everybody talks in a weird way, and that kind of just creates its own sort of comedy language that the film just operates by. And in this film, it's kind of similar in that people do that Yorgos Lanthimos film where there's this kind of unreality where people just kind of talk in this weird affected way where it's like, I talk like this, and then I'm going to do this. And then just make weird noises. Honestly, I just could watch that kind of stuff for about 10 hours straight. I mean, Emma Stone has basically become like one of the best actresses of her era, like almost entirely through him. Just like her in The Favourite, her in this, she's been so good, and clearly she's like obviously unbelievably talented. The entire film essentially rests on her shoulders.
I want her
because
to
if she's not perfect in this film, the whole fucking thing doesn't work.
Apart. Yeah. I want her to become this generation's Meryl Streep. I think she deserves that.
She's already better than Meryl Streep. But...
I mean, I'll be real, I ain't seen fuck all with Meryl Streep in it.
Also, like the cinematography, like there's a lot we could talk about here. It's like the colours and the cinematography of this film amazing. The score is amazing by the guy from Black Midi.
Oh shit.
Yeah, like the only thing that's holding me back from loving it is I'm kind of unsure on the ending, which is unusual because in previous Yorgos Lanthimos films, all of his endings have genuinely just been amazing.
Yes.
And this one, I kind of think I need to rewatch the film because it felt kind of strange, like as a sort of full stop moment for the film, like that's the end. I kind of got what it was going for, but maybe I need to see it again. But otherwise, I'm basically where you're at.
I guess I anticipated the ending in so much as having read the story. Yeah. I mean, I loved the third act with Christopher Abbott and like all that.
He had a really interesting character, yeah.
I love... Because the thing of it is that her trajectory is kind of, you know, sex is so common and throughout this film, and everyone's like, oh, sex in films, oh, shut up. Just shut up. But like, you know, she's using sexuality to kind of divine her path in life and also understand what power is, what control is, and how to gain that in her own life and not just give it to others.
Well, she sort of tries to settle down, doesn't she? And then
she does, yeah.
The reality is she's like, it's a little bit too fucked up living in this sort of weird, radical way I've invented it for myself. I'm going to try settling down. Yes. And it's even more fucked up.
Yes, right, yeah. She's like, yeah, don't worry, I've got this all figured out. And then it's like, oh, maybe I haven't got it all figured out, because maybe there are people out there who are much more brutal and dark in their ways than I have yet to experience. I've experienced trauma in various flavours, but I've never quite come face to face with a murderous psychopath. I like the quietness of the ending. The ending is kind of bittersweet in my mind because it almost kind of feels like she settles into this. She
essentially accepts a more manageable amount of exploitation.
Yes, that's exactly it. That's a great way of articulating it, because I was going to do a shit job.
Sorry.
No, I was. Yeah. She's literally like, well, I could live this very free existence, but it's just like there's too many factors in the world at play that will prevent me from doing this. I have to essentially allow myself to be not as free as I want to be, which is she seems contented but also a little bit kind of withdrawn and much more measured and kind of I guess it is a coming of age story, and in that there is a kind of, oh yeah, I've grown up and I'm an adult now, and to be an adult is to be a bit boring.
Yeah, that's a really fair way of reading it. Like I said, I need to see it again. And I'd probably also say this is probably the most accessible Yorgos Lanthimos film. Maybe apart from The Favourite, but I do think The Favourite's ending, it throws a lot of people off, even though in my opinion it's literally like the best bit of the film. Right. Like I can understand why people watch that and they're like, huh? Yeah, I know, because I was as well, but it was like, what, in a good way. So, but I think this is like, because it's so funny, it's so colourful, It tells such a weird story and has such like a wide array of hilarious, great, dark, weird performances that I think if you wanted to get into Yorgos Lanthimos, this is the perfect entry point, and you can figure out whether you like it or not from there.
Yeah.
And then finally, closing out the Best Picture nominations, we have The Zone of Interest by one of my favourite directors ever, probably my favourite current working director, Jonathan Glazer. Probably one of the most unique films. It's by far the most unique film on this list, I would say.
Yeah, for sure.
And one of the most unique films I've probably ever seen in terms of execution. And this is a borderline experimental film, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
In the way that they made it, if you look into that kind of stuff. It's a film about Auschwitz, and it's about the Hearst family who live essentially sharing a wall.
Immediately adjacent, yes.
Sharing a wall with the Auschwitz camp. What did you think of The Zone of Interest?
Phenomenal. I think in terms of what it sets out to do, its mission statement as a film, it nails it perfectly. That isn't to say it's a perfect film, but like it is the perfect version of itself, in so much as you are literally a fly on the wall in the Hearst household, and the purpose of the film is to just illustrate an ordinary family life offset by the absolute unspeakable horror happening literally only a few feet away from them. There's a great quote in like the Oscars making of kind of behind the scenes video.
Which is a great video.
Which is a great video that breaks down like the making of the film, where Jonathan Glazer says suffering has become ambient to their lives. And that is such a powerful statement, and really carries through the film. It's genuinely very palpable. It's an interesting art film in so much as it's very, very obvious what it's trying to tell you. It's not like this,
It's very unsubtle.
It's very unsubtle. A common criticism from people who don't like art films is that, they're impenetrable. Oh, they don't mean anything.
Yeah, what does it mean?
It's either they don't mean anything, or, they're pretentious, they blah, 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 because in some cases they are, but often it's because they are more impenetrable and people don't want to try and figure those things out for themselves. And that's, you can enjoy whatever films you want. If you don't enjoy that, that's fine. But this kind of film, the telling of it is very arty and whatever, but the messaging is bang, fucking sledgehammer to the skull type shit.
But the presentation is almost like it's artful in its own way, but it's also like, when you think about it, it's almost like the least pretentious way to tell the film.
Oh, I would never call it
essentially
pretentious.
what they, but like, you know what I mean? Like the film, it takes a step back and almost literally allows you to be like a fly on the wall of the house, because the way they filmed it, if you're not aware, is they essentially put cameras in the house and then like the whole crew fucked off and just like the characters just did their scenes and communicated with the director like over like a voice comm thing or whatever.
Right.
Which allowed for like a level of naturalism that you're obviously not going to get if, they're doing a scene, you've got a fucking light in your face and a guy holding up the mic over here. Like, so the film has a really unique atmosphere to it, and it's a really oppressive atmosphere, and the story is kind of secondary to the actual story of the film is incredibly mundane, in that it's about a family who have a work life, and then the work life becomes a bit more difficult. He has to like go and work away.
To move into a different city.
And like she's worried about how she's going to impress her mum with her nice new garden. But the film is kind of constantly looming like the worst crime ever committed by humanity. Like oh, it's happening just out of shot. And obviously it kind of comes down to that core filmmaking principle of like what Steven Spielberg did with Jaws, which is if you don't show the shark is scarier. And it kind of applies that logic to a Holocaust film. And Jonathan Glazer, from what I've heard when making this film, was very, very sort of unsure if he even wanted to make this film, because obviously Holocaust films come with a lot of baggage. There was like, if you could look up, for example, Michelle Haneke's critique of Steven Spielberg's Schindler's List, where it's like, should you even make films about the Holocaust? It's like, and there's a discussion to be had there in terms of like, should you make this kind of stuff entertainment? I'd probably fall on the yes side, because I think you can get a lot of good stuff from that, but there's certainly a discussion to be had here. But this film takes such a unique approach to like this kind of film, and it completely avoids all cliche, and I think probably has my favourite ending of the year in terms of just pure power, because like I said, it's completely unpretentious, but it is a film that is essentially just holding up a mirror to the audience, being like, essentially you're not so different from these people, which is like an incredibly
That's why that quote
thing.
is so good. Suffering has become ambient to your lives. Suffering is ambient to all of our lives inherently. Like those of us who are not currently suffering are in some way culpable
like
of
benefiting from.
Yeah, I mean,
suffering,
obviously we're not the fucking Hearst family, and no one's trying to imply that, but there is a level to, like you say, the mirror of like, there are things from this that really do apply to everything happening in the world today, like be it really grand things which Glazer actually went on to make a speech about, or you know, even the smaller things of like, you know, I don't know, homelessness in your local area, or like sort of suffering on,
or like who made your iPhone?
Suffering on like slightly smaller or just alternate scales, you know, things like that. So yeah, the film is incredibly effective and moving in those terms.
And it's not just cold as well. Like the segments with the girl with the night vision camera, which I guess is
so sick.
Which is really, for starters, like obviously really visually striking, with this kind of heat-seeking camera that they use, because
it's like a military camera.
They just wanted to like. I was like, when I was watching, I was like, why did they do that? And when I was reading about it, it's like, well, they just wanted to be able to shoot someone at night without like lighting. Essentially, they would like. I think Jonathan Glazer said he like wanted to avoid the artifice of cinema, i.e., like even like if you like someone in a certain way, that's a way that you're sort of manipulating the audience. Because if you have the same face in like one situation and you light it a slightly different way, it's going to give you a different feeling or a different implication each way, right? And that was a really effective way of doing that. And then the scene where she like plays the song that she finds on the piano is like genuinely like one of the most haunting things I've ever seen, on top of the ending, which is also just like a sledgehammer to the heart, really. Yeah, I think it's one of the best films of the year. It's probably second to Oppenheimer for me, because it is not a pleasant film to watch, and it's not really meant to be.
No.
And yeah, like you implied, also shout out to Jonathan Glazer for actually doing something with his speech and really saying the obvious. Like, I don't understand how it's controversial.
It's controversial because of the political ties of certain nations, i.e. America to Israel. And to say that committing genocide is a bad thing is somehow...
so how is that controversial?
Is somehow a statement of anti-Semitism, even though to criticize a state for committing genocide does not mean you hate all people who are Jewish or all people from that state. I don't hate all Russian people because they're committing an illegal war in Ukraine. I hate Putin and his regime. Similarly, you can think the same thing about Israel without hating all Jews. Now, does it mean that it's right that there's been anti-Semitism and like people have kind of been using this as an excuse to be anti-Semitic in certain situations? Like, obviously that's deplorable as well.
I mean,
but this wasn't a statement of anti-Semitism in any way, and he himself is Jewish.
Well,
and
in his speech, he also says like, the October 7th attack was wrong, and then also says like, and the genocide in Gaza is also wrong.
Yes.
So he also both sided it in a way that like most normal people probably find that quite acceptable. But what I think is interesting is his quote has like been so like brutally taken out of context, then people have taken the line where he says, I am refuting my Jewishness, and they cut it off there and ignore the bit where he says, being used for complicity in genocide. It's like, well, you kind of left out the important, the predicate there completely changes the meaning of the sentence. It'd be like if I said, you know, I am racist, and then like, you know, said something else after that, and you just like quote me, it's like, oh, Rupert says he is racist, and that's like the headline.
Well, like, in that exact situation, it'd be like if I said this, Rupert says this. Like, I could literally do the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Right, so that was stupid, and everyone who signed that stupid petition, shut up.
Was there a petition?
Yeah, there was like a petition like, we condemn, like Jonathan Glazer. And what sucks is, I have a horrible feeling that speech was probably single-handedly meant, he already makes one film every 10 years. I have a horrible feeling he ain't making another one anytime soon after that.
Yeah, but he's always been a kind of slightly independent guy.
I hope I'm wrong, because like I said, he is one of my favourite working directors, if not my favourite. And
mate, you just wait, we're not going to be working after this. We just said that Jonathan Glazer had a point.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But I mean, look, he continues.
Channel.
He's made 4 films. They've all been exceptional. So even if this is the last of his running and he's now buried his career, fair fucking play.
Fair dues, mate.
To Jonathan Glazer.
But yeah, that wraps up all the Best Picture nominations. As we've said, we thought Oppenheimer would win. It did win, and I would like to say, if it wasn't clear, I thought Poor Things would have been my favourite, but I would never have assumed it would win over.
It was a tight call because it was such a good selection. I would have been happy with a lot of those films winning.
Literally all but one film were good, and most of those other films were great. Like,
Yeah,
genuinely
I think of
fantastic
all of them,
films.
I think Anatomy of a Fall is a worthy winner. I think Killers of the Flower Moon is a worthy winner. I think Oppenheimer is obviously a worthy winner. I think Poor Things is a worthy winner, and I think Zone of Interest is a worthy winner. I think the others are all good, but I think any of those could have won.
If those films had all won over the course of the 2010s, it would have been a better decade than what we actually got.
Probably, yeah. Like, I like Coda and I actually kind of like Green Book, but like neither of those films should have really won, right?
They would have never have won in a year with these films.
Yeah, no chance.
No fucking chance. So now we move on to Best Leading Actor. We have as our nominations Bradley Cooper for Maestro, Coleman Domingo for Rustin, Paul Giamatti for The Holdovers, Cillian Murphy for Oppenheimer, and Jeffrey Wright for American Fiction. Now, do we want to briefly talk about Rustin, as it's the only film here we haven't discussed yet?
We'll quickly go over it, very quickly. It sucks. It was a terrible, terrible film. People are saying Coleman Domingo saves the film. He doesn't. He's probably the best part of it, but the film is so bad that you're basically saying nothing. It's like Netflix level pandering about the unsung hero of the MLK speech, but instead of like revealing a hidden interesting story, it reveals a hidden uninteresting story. When I'm sure if you actually read into it, there is a really interesting story there.
Yes.
The film completely failed to communicate that.
It commits the same crime that Maestro does, in so much as presenting you with a very interesting, multifaceted character and then basically telling you nothing or presenting you no interesting ways of exploring that character. It's very sort of tepid.
Caricature again.
Yeah, very caricaturish. It's about doing an impression of someone from history rather than doing a
here's a zany guy.
Interesting
this is good
retelling.
acting type shit.
Yeah. When you say it's pandering, it's a very wishy-washy, soft touch biopic where you kind of go, wasn't this a great thing that happened in history? It's like, yeah, no fucking shit. Like,
what do you actually have to say?
Yeah, what do you
about
have to say? Why are you telling me this story again? What are you contributing to this piece of history by telling this, by showing me this film? And ultimately, the answer is absolutely fucking nothing. Coleman Domingo did not deserve this nomination. That said, he is not a bad actor.
He's a good actor.
He was actually very good in The Colour Purple.
Yeah.
Even though his character is a horrible, despicable piece of shit, he has like way more going on in that film. Way more.
Which is crazy because he's
work
literally
with.
a side character in that film, and he's in almost every single scene in Rustin because he's obviously the title character.
And his role in The Colour Purple left so much more of an impression on me, especially with regards to his acting ability.
Yeah, I completely agree.
So yeah, I mean,
like, he's clearly like a good, charismatic, talented actor. I hope to see him in something actually good because I'd never really heard of him until this Oscar season.
Yeah, another one. Yeah, that's sprung up, and I'm very interested in what he's done previously and what he will go on to do. I mean, having these nominations should mean that he'll get some other big roles, and I hope he does. But Rustin is not a good demonstration
it's
of
streaming fodder that's been somehow chucked up here.
Yes. Well, I suppose that's probably something to do with the production company owned by the Obamas.
Oh, right, okay.
So, they've got some pulling power in the industry.
I guess so, yeah. They must have run a
imagine.
good campaign behind the scenes because this film will be forgotten it's already forgotten.
Yeah, no one fucking watched it.
No one watched it and it sucked. We've already sort of talked about Bradley Cooper and his performance, I think, quite extensively. We both agree he should not have won. I don't really know why he's nominated.
Again, it's the whole transformative. He did a biopic.
But Leonardo DiCaprio should be there.
Yes.
Like, I think that's a big snub in this regard. Leonardo DiCaprio should definitely have been here. I mean, you could have nominated the guy from Zone of Interest. I understand why you did, why you didn't. And that film is not quite a film, but he is actually amazing in that film. Jeffrey Wright is Paul Giamatti is probably my second favourite in this one.
Yes.
Like, he is really good, and Jeffrey Wright is probably my third favourite for this category. But I think Cillian Murphy just clears everyone here quite easily.
I mean, you echo me entirely. Once again, we both said that Oppenheimer would win this category, and it did. So we're 2 for 2. Yeah, the other three are much closer fought. Jeffrey Wright, I'm very happy he's getting his flowers. Rightfully nominated, but also rightfully not
winner.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody was really in an even remote shout of winning this outside of Cillian.
I agree. Yeah,
and he did have the most to work with, to be fair. Like, Oppenheimer is a perfect Oscars film on top of his performance being the perfect Oscars-y kind of performance. In that, like, you know, disappearing into the character and it being historical.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
topical
we all know that biopics do incredibly well at the Oscars, but we're in an interesting situation here where the biopic in question is actually good. Actually, like, one of the best films.
Now that you've actually called it a biopic, I've only just kind of clocked it, like, it is a biopic.
It is a biopic. But yeah, the problem is it's
just unlike...
Biopics are so synonymous with wishy-washy,
formula
Oscar bait type filmmaking, where it's like, we're doing this because we're trying to pander to a group of people that already like the messaging or the character or whatever about this period of history, whereas Oppenheimer is a much more multifaceted kind of deep exploration into the character, as we said. So yeah, Cillian Murphy, 100%. And I'm so happy because I remember as a kid loving Cillian Murphy in Batman and in 28 Days Later and thinking, holy shit, why isn't this guy like one of the biggest actors on the planet? And for a few years he was kind of trickling under the surface a bit,
the periphery,
and then Peaky Blinders started happening and everyone was like, oh, who's this Cillian Murphy guy? So I already knew who this guy was. You're all fucking fake. But yeah, now he's got an Oscar win under his belt.
Totally deserved.
Sky's the fucking limit, mate.
Yeah.
And I hope he just keeps carrying on, putting out bangers.
And one quick note on his performance, another thing we didn't really mention is like the black and white element of Oppenheimer, sort of the black and white versus the colour scenes portraying different perspectives. I don't know what the exact interpretation is. Some people have said like the colour is like Oppenheimer's perspective and the black and white is objective, or the black and white is Robert Downey Jr.'s character's perspective and the colour is Oppenheimer's perspective.
Yeah.
I don't know what the correct answer is there, but if you watch his performance in the film, the way he acts and like the slight subtleties between the two are really, really interesting.
Okay.
And he's a really, really...
Well, I definitely need to rewatch it then. I mean, I was going to anyway, but that's fascinating.
He's doing a lot more in that role, even though you can watch it and see like, oh wow, he's doing a lot. He's actually like an exceptional actor, and I think it's totally deserved. I agree with you.
Right, next up we have Best Supporting Actor, and our nominations are Sterling K. Brown for American Fiction, Robert De Niro for Killers of the Flower Moon, Robert Downey Jr. for Oppenheimer, Ryan Gosling for Barbie, and Mark Ruffalo for Poor Things. Now, if you ask me, this is the hardest category in terms of all of them being fucking great. It's so difficult to choose between the main four. I mean, Sterling K. Brown, I'll briefly go over, is very good in the film, in American Fiction. I just don't think that he has enough scenes to really shine in the way that the other
I don't think the film
four
really
have.
did him justice in what he had to do in the film. But his character is immediately interesting, likeable, and his performance is really great.
Yes, and I like him as an actor, and I think he's just a little too peripheral to the main story to really have much impact on me as the viewer, especially in comparison to these four. Robert De Niro in Killers of the Flower Moon, as already said, he is such a despicable, evil character, and he gives so much to it. He is so delightfully sinister, and like the way his character sort of starts off, kind of the nature of his manipulation evolves through the film as things get more severe, the situation evolves, the niceties of his persona fall away, and that natural degradation is so well executed by him.
Yeah, I think it's probably the best villain performance of the year. It's up there. He's genuinely creepy as hell.
Oh, for sure.
If we had a best cameo, I think they should probably bring that in as an award. I think
why not?
My favourite would be Casey Affleck in Oppenheimer, who shows up and is immediately terrifyingly creepy. I don't know if you remember him. He shows up as General Passion. He's like a communist killer who's like been imported by the US.
Yes. He has that brief talk.
Like literally one scene, and he just shows up, and it's like, holy shit, that guy's terrifying. That would be my like second favourite. But I was just because it's a cameo. I just think they should have a cameo.
What about Jesse Plemons?
Jesse Plemons is good. He's kind of a good guy in that film. Yeah.
No, sorry. Oh, sorry. We're talking about villains. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. But yeah, like Robert De Niro, just absolutely creepy as hell in that film, and like a really interesting role for him to take in like late age, I think. As well. Yeah.
Now that you've mentioned there should be a Best Cameos award, I would like to throw it out to anyone in the comment section. who wants to suggest who would be nominations for past and present best cameo winners. That's actually a fucking genius.
Oppenheimer has a lot. You could also throw Gary Oldman in from Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
I like his bit where he goes like, "Boo hoo," and he's like, "The blood's on my hands," and he like wipes it with the napkin and just like chucks it on him. He's like, "Get that yellow belly out of here." As RBJ or whatever. No, RBJ. What's he called?
Lyndon B. Johnson.
LBJ. Yeah, he was great in that as well. I think Ryan Gosling, in terms of a comedic performance of the year, we've already spoken about how funny he is in the film. Like, he is just like kind of electric every time he's on screen. But it's actually Mark Ruffalo.
That's yours. That's your choice.
I really wanted him to win. I can't argue. It was, in terms of like quality, Robert Downey Jr. and Robert De Niro are like the best performances there, and I couldn't pick between them. I think I predicted Robert Downey Jr.
You did.
But I kind of wanted Mark Ruffalo to win, just because he's so funny. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was the same in terms of... Well, I wasn't the same in terms of wanting Mark Ruffalo to win over Robert Downey Jr. He was both my favourite and my choice. We are 3 for 3, for anyone keeping count. But, like I said, I could have been completely happy with any of those 4 winning because they're all brilliant in their own specific ways. Yeah. Ryan Gosling and Mark Ruffalo on the more comedic side of things. Like, Ryan Gosling may as well have just like won most charismatic man on the planet award.
Most sexy and fun seeming guy of the year.
Literally me award goes to me, Ryan Gosling.
Every weirdo's like inner vision of themselves.
We can only hope to attain a mere % of the charisma that Ryan Gosling has in his little finger.
But I just think Mark Ruffalo is super underrated as an actor. I think he's been like super underutilized in the MCU films.
Yeah.
And is kind of just known for that now, unfortunately. But if you go through his like back catalogue of films, he's been like excellent in so much stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Like recently he was in like Dark Waters, which he was like exceptionally good in as well. And in this, taking on, like, he obviously, it's very much a supporting character role in that his role in Poor Things is to bounce off Emma Stone, who's also being absolutely hilarious in that film. His job is to kind of be really funny in his own way, but also provide a sort of comedic foil for her character to sort of constantly get one up on over on her.
Yeah.
So I think he serves that purpose really well, and like his character's fate is really dark and sad in the end, and his character's just like he's just a complete loser piece of shit, and I love that. It's so great.
But I love how the sort of veil is lifted or falls, or whichever metaphor you want to go for.
But he really is the most pathetic guy ever, because he's like, he basically realises, oh, she's never really had like a sexual experience with a man, so like if I come in early, I'm gonna seem great,
and then I can have dominion over her. I can have control.
And then like at first he is great to her, but then like she basically goes on and realises like, oh wait, loads of people are way better than you, you're a fucking loser.
Yeah. Sadly, we've done very little talking about Robert Downey Jr. in this section, but like we said before, transformative.
I mean, it's just like, you have to see it, because I mean, the first time seeing Oppenheimer, I had to double take to be like, oh my god, is that Robert Downey Jr.? Because I didn't really even know that he was in the film beforehand. And he really transforms into the role. He's playing like a really kind of interesting character, in that he's this kind of embittered piece of shit who does have points. There's monologues in the film where he kind of does have a point, and like, Oppenheimer is kind of a hypocrite. Like, he clearly, part of Oppenheimer's motivation is regret for making the nuclear bomb in his opposition to the H-bomb, which is kind of like the second half of the film. It's like, he does have a point there, but he's sort of this like career politician who's trying to sort of use this manoeuvring to benefit himself.
Yes.
And he plays that maneuvery politics guy basically perfectly.
Yeah.
With like a chip on his shoulder.
And again, like, obviously for so many years he's been synonymous with the MCU stuff. People were wondering, well, what does the future look like for an actor of his caliber when, you know, he's essentially been typecast for the better part of like, you know, 15 years or whatever. So the fact that he had this opportunity is amazing in of itself, and I hope that it leads to more kind of weird character study type films, you know, like his role in Zodiac before all of this stuff. Like, that's kind of the role this reminds me most of.
Yeah, that's a good shout.
I haven't seen some of his, you know, earliest stuff when he was like much younger, like Chaplin. Yeah. But I'm eager to see more.
Yeah.
More arty RDJ, please.
So we're 3 for 3.
We're 3 for 3. We basically predicted the Oppenheimer sweep in so much as
it was the easiest thing to do.
It was so easy.
Yeah.
Like, you know, who else was going to fucking win any of these awards? Okay, so next up we have Best Actress, and our nominations are Annette Bening for NYAD, Lily Gladstone for Killers of the Flower Moon, Sandra Hüller for Anatomy of a Fall, Carey Mulligan for Maestro, and Emma Stone for Poor Things. Now, we also haven't talked about NYAD, so briefly, would you like to tell me?
It's a mum film about swimming. It's really fucking boring. It's the most... I said Rustin was the most Oscar bait film on the list. It probably is. NYAD's marginally better than Rustin, I would say. But there's nothing to say about it. It's fucking boring. It tells a kind of interesting story. It's like it's not as boring as it could have been, but it was still boring.
It's about, was it Diana NYAD? Is that her name?
Yeah, so basically she swam from like what? Cuba
to Florida, yes.
Yeah, which is like never been done.
In her like 50s or 60s, which is an amazing feat of human strength, and it basically it does a much better job of some of the of Maestro and
like
Rustin.
Maestro. It's really interesting actually. It's actually kind of better than Maestro in that I actually did totally get, because the film is so simplistic. I did actually just completely understand, like, right, this is who this person is.
Yeah.
This is what they wanted to do, and this is how they did it. And it kind of like, it's very broad strokes and kind of dull, but in a sense it was just more. I
actually learned about Nyad's character. I found out that I don't like her,
but just kind of the point of the film.
Which is kind of the point of the film. She's so determined that she forces people away from her that just want to love and protect her and care for her. But unfortunately, it almost did too good of a job in convincing me that she's not a very nice or likable person.
But you know what's really interesting is there's actually a lot of controversy about the real story in terms of how legitimate her swim actually was.
Yeah.
And what's a real shame is that even though this film is very run-of-the-mill, it's not directed particularly well, it's not directed particularly badly. There's like a weird, my highlight of the film was there's a weird POV shark shot.
Yes,
where it's like you get shark vision. It's like
I love a good POV shot of some
very
random
weird.
shit.
Don't know why they did that, but the real story is actually really complex and kind of interesting in terms of like what actually qualifies. And the film kind of like briefly is like, oh yeah, kind of, and then doesn't do anything with it.
Yeah, so apparently, like the surrounding controversy of her real life story is that she basically went to some fairly great lengths to like muddy the names of people that did. So you did the way in the film she does it is like, this isn't the first time this has ever been done. This is the first time it's been done without a cage, without like some kind of netting around her, large scale shit, but people have done it that way before because you need to protect from sharks in Cuba and jellyfish and all this stuff, which were large parts of why she failed in several attempts. And she was basically like, these people that did it didn't do it fucking properly, and like went, tried to basically put herself on a pedestal and try and claim that no one else had done it properly to prop up her own ego and the own importance of her act, which if the film had explored that side of things, it could have been really interesting. But it clearly was another one where it was like, we're doing this kind of to make people feel good and to kind of like we want it to be like a film about triumph, about battling things in your old age.
It tells the most boring version of the story.
Which is why it's mumcore, because it's like, don't worry, you can be successful and powerful and taking charge even in the autumn of your life. A wonderful message, no problem with that message. Unfortunately, it's tied to a person who is actually kind of much more complicated than that, and much less wholesome than you would necessarily think. Even the film acknowledges that she's not all that wholesome. But my main thing about Annette Bening in the character is that I just find her very unlikable. Not just the character, but I just didn't like her either. We're talking about a lot of charisma from these other actors that you might not necessarily have been doing like hugely detailed performances, but their natural charisma rides through. Your Ryan Goslings of the world, it just carries the performance almost effortlessly. Annette Bening is kind of, for me, the opposite of that, the antithesis of that.
Well, I actually found that kind of interesting, because what's interesting about those characters is often how uncharismatic they are, in that like this person is very one-sided. Like they're interested in one thing, and it's like, I'm going to do this one thing, and I'm very like tunnel vision on that. So I don't have a problem with Annette Bening in it. I thought she was good. She was probably one of the better parts of the film. The film just overall is just so unnotable. Like Annette Bening is literally like the last of the film's problems in terms of just like the film being interesting or good. Like the acting in that film was okay. You know what I mean? It's just the film itself is just fucking whatever. So glad she didn't win. The real battle here for me, we've kind of touched on Lily Gladstone. I thought she was excellent. but I feel like I need to see Killers of the Flower Moon one more time because what she was doing was very subtle and interesting. But I ultimately do think she felt like more of a supporting actor in the film as opposed to a main actor, which I think is probably why she didn't win this. So the real battle for me was between Sandra Hüller and Emma Stone, and I would have been happy with either of them. They were probably on an even slate. I think Emma Stone has the harder ask, as we sort of already touched on.
Yeah, like she had the more difficult job.
Yeah, but I think Sandra Hüller was exceptional. So I would have honestly been happy with either.
I would give Sandra Hüller the honorary award of being fucking great in 2 Oscar films.
Yeah, she has the best My Next Made Up award, best crying in a car scene. She cries in the car and it's great. It's really well lit. She starts crying. I was like, beautiful. I loved it.
Bellissimo.
Yeah, I love scenes of people crying in a car. I think that's good shit. I think we should have more of that.
Good genre. Good genre.
Like the ending of Breaking Bad. That's another great crying in the car moment. I think I predicted Emma Stone.
We had the same predictions in that we both predicted that Lily Gladstone would win.
Oh, okay.
But our favourites were Emma Stone.
Right. Okay.
So we both fucked
got it
up
wrong. Okay.
in the same
So we're still just
way.
3 for 3.
We're still 3 for 3. We cocked up. We've so nearly had it, but we now move on towards Best Supporting Actress. Our nominations here are Emily Blunt for Oppenheimer, Danielle Brooks for The Colour Purple, America Ferrera for Barbie, Jodie Foster for NYAD, and Divine Joy Randolph for The Holdovers, who won it. Do you want to briefly talk about The Colour Purple?
Fine. The Colour Purple, I've read the book. I know this is based on the musical, based on the book, so it's not based on the book. But having read the book, which is just very upsetting and depressing, and then sort of becomes very schmaltzy and sweet at the end, turning it into a musical just feels inappropriate. Like the actual content of that book is so fucked up and dark. It would be like making Schindler's List a musical.
It feels so inherently flawed, and
and the songs aren't even good. So as a film, you kind of fucked up there because the film is just like none of the songs are very good.
It's not just like there is a musical, because there are musicals with like the sort of dark subtext of like what's happening, like Sound of Music, right?
Yeah, or I don't know, the Les Miserables.
Les Miserables might kind of like there's a style of musical, and I think that this is very Broadway. I mean, it's based off of a Broadway play, but there's like ways of doing the music that's very like Broadway-ish, like that very sort of pompous and kind of campy way, and then there's more subtle ways of doing things, or I wouldn't call The Sound of Music subtle, but it just has a much more kind of like cheery kind of I don't know, whimsical quality to some of it, and I much prefer that kind of version of a musical than this. So like, I was already eye rolling at the notion of it being a musical, and then it was this kind of musical. I was like, oh my god. But I found, in spite of the fact that I hated the first half quite passionately, as it went on, I find myself slightly warming to it. I wouldn't say it's a good film, but I didn't hate it as much as I feared I would from that first.
It ultimately, for me, falls in the camp of boring Oscar bait. Obviously, like the story itself is quite powerful, quite good. I don't think the film doesn't really feel like it goes to those dark places and lingers on them in the way that the book really, really does.
Sure.
Because I think the power of the book is that you're kind of trapped in a situation with her because you're just reading her diary and it's like, this is awful. Yeah. This fucking sucks, And the film, it has this like light-hearted tone. Obviously, it does go to dark places. Like there's like the scene where she's been like so abused that like she's speaking to this guy's like, oh, my wife's just too feisty, and she's like, oh, well, you should just beat the shit out of her, because she's like, she doesn't know like how else to
yes.
Which is like, I remember in the book, because I was like, wow, that's really fucked. Like, and it kind of really gets to the key of like this kind of generational trauma, and you can kind of see like that's a really powerful moment, and the film does that bit, and it's like good, but then you then have this like, I might be remembering this wrong, but then there's like this whole like musical number about like, you should not beat women, and it's like doing a song about it, and it's like, it wasn't for me. I guess Danielle Brooks in it is fine. She does a very Broadway-ish performance.
Yes.
She wouldn't be the actor that I would have nominated. She has like clearly great charisma, but just like,
I forget the name of the actress, but the woman that plays the sort of semi-love interest of the main character, the flighty singer who sort of hops in and out of her life on her whim. She was the more captivating and interesting.
I mean, I would either have gone for Carmen Domingo, like we've already discussed, or I would have gone or the girl who plays Celie was good.
She was great,
yeah.
She was my favourite part of the film.
I guess you can't put her in supporting
and
actress.
she was, to my knowledge, actually in the original
the Broadway show. Right,
so
okay. So like either of those would have been fine, but obviously then you'd have to displace someone from those other categories, which is tough. So I wouldn't have nominated her personally. But
yes, Emily Blunt.
She's excellent in Oppenheimer. I would have no complaints if she'd have won. I think America Ferrara, I think her nomination's a bit of a piss take. Don't know why she's nominated, because she's like the worst part of the film, in my opinion. I guess she's got that one monologue, but I've already explained that I don't like that.
Yeah.
Jodie Foster, no. And Divine Joy Randolph, I think, is a really deserving winner. I think I said Jodie Foster was going to win.
You're going to hate me for this.
What?
For some reason, in my twisted logic, I actually, I said my favourite was Jodie Foster.
Really? What?
I think, okay, here's my logic.
She is the better part of that film. Like, of that film, she's the best part, but that film just sucks. So I
think my logic of it, and it might have been kind of slightly tainted by the fact that I watched NYAD more recently of any of the others, but it was a kind of similar thing before.
You sympathise with her character.
Yeah, there's that. I mean, one, I do just genuinely like Jodie Foster in the film, and she does so much of the heavy lifting in terms of. I disliked Annette Bening so much. I was like, the only reason that I'm like enjoying this film in any way is because Jodie Foster is here, and because she's like giving a real.
Yeah, she's the character that you root for. Yeah.
But not just that. She's like, there's a real wholesomeness, a real heart to her, a real sincerity of like, I care. I can clearly see that she cares about this so much that her friend can achieve this thing. And Jodie Foster just has this sort of natural class to her. It's water off a duck's back sort of thing. Not to say, I love Divine Joy Randolph in The Holdovers. Again, it was kind of a thing with Lily Gladstone of just like, I didn't really feel like she was enough of a presence in the movie. And that's much more arguable. Much more arguable. And I concede that I should probably be smacked in the back of the head for saying these things, because she was really good and probably better, and I don't really know. Her
backstory, she has like a Divine Joy Randolph in The Holdovers, if you're not aware, she's a character, she's like the cleaner, cook,
for the school,
and she has a really kind of sad backstory to her character, and there's like a couple of moments. She's really funny in the film as well. She's kind of got this like attitude where she doesn't really like, she doesn't take any shit, but like there's a moment where her character gets drunk and she kind of like opens up, and it's like really sad, and she kind of like goes into her like backstory, but she's also like a really kind of good counterpoint to other characters in the film where they're feeling sorry for themselves and she just like talks sense to them. So I really liked the multi-layered element of her character, where it was like she's like very strong in her own way, but then like has these moments of vulnerability in a way that felt very real. Whereas Jodie Foster, like I think it's just because NYAD sucks. Like I just couldn't get into it. But I completely agree. She is the best part of NYAD.
Yes. Maybe it was just that. But I think, you know what? Yeah, I think it is that. It's more just a case of Divine Joy Randolph, Emily Blunt, very, very good, very core characters in those films. But Jodie Foster made that film. Yeah. Like that film is shit without her.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's why I was going to, in so much as, in a literal sense of supporting the role. Like
she carries the whole film.
Literally supports the whole film. So 4-3 to me. I predicted Divine, but you predicted Jodie Foster. So for Best Director, we have Justine Triet for Anatomy of a Fall, Martin Scorsese for Killers of the Flower Moon, Christopher Nolan for Oppenheimer, who won, Yorgos Lanthimos for Poor Things, and Jonathan Glazer for Zone of Interest. A great lineup.
They're literally films. All of them are deserving winners. I think that's actually like, when I said earlier about Best Picture, like these are the ones that I would like. I could have won and I'd be fine with.
Yeah.
That's literally all of those films.
All of them.
Yeah. So they completely nailed it with this category. I think Christopher Nolan deserves it. Obviously, he's never won one.
I'm really glad for that. Yes.
Like Christopher Nolan is kind of like, he's gonna be in that canon of great directors. Like he's gonna be up there with Spielberg and Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola, and all those like legendary directors. But he's like of this era of cinema.
Yeah.
He's going to be up there, and he totally deserves it. And I think Oppenheimer is a worthy winner, so I'm not mad at it. Equally, I could have been happy with any of these.
So
I kind of wanted Jonathan Glazer to win.
I had him as my favourite. Maybe for this one, it was more because I was trying to think of like, right, I want Zone of Interest to win something.
Yeah.
What's it going to win? Like, Nolan's going to win so much for Oppenheimer, like across the board.
Yeah.
Maybe this would be one where he should. I tell a lie. I did predict Christopher Nolan, but I had Jonathan Glazer is a favourite. I've written it in a more confusing way than you have.
But I think I did the exact same.
But we did the same thing, so we're now 5-4. We basically said all the adoring things we can about these other films, so should we push on?
Yes, so up next, Best Animated Picture.
Yeah, okay, for this, we have Elemental, Nimona, Robot Dreams, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, and the winner, The Boy and the Heron. Now, as I said before, this was the only film that we couldn't get our hands on for this video, so unfortunately we cannot elucidate anything on The Boy and the Heron, unfortunately, which is annoying because it fucking won.
Yes.
But, you know, I have faith. Hayao Miyazaki is an amazing director. I love so many of his Studio Ghibli films. Spirited Away was like an absolute like eye-opening and like sea change moment for me as a kid watching that. It was like, holy shit, like a new world of cinema was opened up to me at like, you know, I was like 5, 6 when that came out.
It does look really good. I'm sure it's really good.
We're going to start off with Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, which I think is the...
What did you predict, by the way? I want to
Okay,
know.
all right, we'll talk about predictions. All right, okay. So I actually said my favourite was Spider-Man, and I predicted Spider-Man. So I failed.
So we're
on that.
5-5 now, because I predicted The Boy and the Heron, even though I hadn't seen it.
Yes, you are in fact correct. So talking about Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, I am a big fan of this art style, but it kind of was just like a visual feast, and that's kind of the main draw for me with these this sort of series of Spider-Man animated films. This was lacking in so much in comparison to the first, in terms of like the sort of succinctness and effectiveness of the storytelling, and kind of just like really getting across everything in like a clear and well communicated way. This was much more jumbled and kind of scattershot, but at the same time, visually, you got so much more. I mean, in terms of exploring different like locales.
If you were simply probably nominating on the technical impressiveness of the animation, this would win by like it would win at a canter. Like like it is like genuinely technically astounding what they've managed to do. And in terms of it, like the last film, Into the Spider-Verse, I loved, and I much prefer to the second one. I think I'm slightly probably in the minority in quite how much I don't rate this film as much as the first one.
Yes.
But I still thought it was good, and I thought the animation was even better than the first one. And I'm totally on board with the aesthetic. I love what they're doing with it. It's probably still my favourite of the 4 that we have seen. Yes. I'm still not totally keen
if it was like a case of, here's an animated film, do you think this should win an Oscar? You'd be like, no.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
What about it are you not as keen on?
So I guess a quick note as well is that a lot of people were mad this wasn't nominated for Best Picture.
Right.
So
yes, but it's got a very sort of slavish and adoring fan base.
Yeah, like it is loved on a level that is just ridiculous. Like it's jumped up on all the like best of
a little
lists.
bit too much.
Yeah, I would agree. And the big problem I have with it is that, for a start, it doesn't have an ending, which always annoys me. It feels like
a secret part 1.
Yeah, it is a secret part 1 film, which I always will find annoying, and it's annoying in this film. I also just don't think that the film like is crazy levels of energy, like goes so hard, and it's like it's ramming up tension. I kind of found it, the journey of Miles Morales as a character is not as succinct and interesting, and straightforward is the wrong word, but the first film does a really good job of like, he goes from being this person at the start of the film to this person at the end of the film, and it does a really good job of succinctly portraying that, and he has a great dynamic with the other Peter Parker, which really carried that film for me. I loved the chemistry between the two, and this film, it introduces all these like this crazy cast, and there's never that sticking point that the film can just always come back to of like, here's the heart of the film, and I think it's suffered from that. And I think it's also like a lot of the set pieces, whilst really impressive, were just felt a little bit, to me personally, a spectacle for the sake of it. Okay. Which is not a problem necessarily. I just, when the first film is as impressive as it is, I prefer that.
The failing of the film there, in my mind, is that it's so clearly a part 1 in the sense that the resolution, the kind of arc of the character is really
halfway through,
in limbo. Yeah, the arc of it is about a sense of belonging. So your first thing is about him trying to become a hero and like not feeling he deserves to be a hero. This time he's become a hero, and he is outcast for something completely beyond his control, and he's incredibly hurt and ostracized even by the people that he loved and cared for. And that's a really powerful story, because and a very easy one for you to get on side with the character for. That sense of isolation is very palpable. Unfortunately, the film doesn't really resolve how he's able to overcome that sense of isolation, like what he can do to fight against the people that are trying to pin him back and push him into a corner. Because that will take place in the next film. I have faith that next film will be good, given that these two films have been good, but it's perhaps slightly awkward to kind of analyze it on its own without it. But if you are to look at a film, a couple films that did the part 1, part 2 better, I would illustrate in Dune, in that Dune has a much better kind of part 1 resolves, and this is where the characters started and ended, and you've got like this clear arc, and then the second film, in spite of beginning in the middle of a same story, has a separate arc for that character. Even though it does continue that arc, it's like it's
two separate sections of the same thing, and it feels more clean. And another element of this film, I just really didn't find it as funny. I guess that's another thing. Like the humor just didn't click for me with this film. Like the first one is really funny and it has a lot of great visual humor, and this does too at points. But like I found a lot of the meta and the multiverse humor stuff, just in general, a little bit tiresome. Maybe I'm just like, this is like old man shit.
It's a very ADHD, everything happening all at once type film, and it can be a bit exhausting.
It got to me
in so much, but at the same time, it's also, I'm sure, a very rewarding film to return to on multiple watches, because such a visual feast happening that you could pick out all sorts of different details on multiple watches, which I'm looking forward to doing. But that would have been my pick, given that The Boy and the Heron was an absentee. We'll move on to Robot Dreams next.
It's silent animated film. Very different animation style to all three of these. It's okay.
He's okay.
I don't really have a lot to say about it.
My take on it is it feels like an extended...
It's a short film, isn't it?
Yes. It is effectively a short film stretched out into a much longer film.
There's like a bunch of side quests added
with side quests. It also kind of feels like an episode of like an animated TV show that's just been turned into something bigger. If you told me this was a special for BoJack Horseman,
it's a Past Lives B-side, but a really
very much like Past Lives. Yes, the story really does follow that. Breaking it down it's the story of a dog who needs love and doesn't have any in his life, and
so he buys a robot
so that he can have something to share his affection with. And it's all going well until the robot breaks down and loses charge on the beach, and he can't go back and charge it, and then he's somehow never able to get back to it until this specific point, and so they spend all this time apart. There are some slight contrivances in that setup, but I'll allow it just for the purposes of the story it's being told. The problem for me is that they basically kind of come up with... Actually, you know what? I won't allow them as contrivances, because what they essentially function as a means to turn this short film into a feature film. Because the only reason this doesn't resolve or go in a certain direction faster is because they're like, no, he can't do it. The beach is closed. Oh, what, he
Why?
can't? The beach is...
And it's like he doesn't even seem like... The problem is like, I get the ending of the film and what it's going for, like with that kind of like melancholic kind of sad thing, is like, but like it was nothing he could do. But like...
Just totally shit.
He could have done. Like, there's loads of stuff like he kind of gives up very quickly. And I was just like, oh right, this dog's a piece of shit. It's like, you got to try hard. He's like, the beach is closed. I couldn't get a permit. Fuck it, guess my friend's gonna die.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you're falling in love with this robot and you're just gonna leave them to get...
Like, the beach is also huge. Like, go try and get in from another angle. Like, go in the night, sneak in. Like, do something.
At least...
That's a massive... That's an example of, like, a kind of plot hole where it's like... I'm quite forgiving generally these days with plot holes. Like, a film has to sometimes have a contrivance that... as long as it's, like, acceptable, and that's a very subjective thing, I guess. If it's like, I can buy it, then I'm generally going to be a little bit forgiving. As long as the film itself is good. Like, if it's bad, then I'm obviously going to be less forgiving. With this, it's like, that's a sort of contrivance that feels like a plot, like, you just like, we have to for the film to go the way we want it to.
Yeah. And then the name of the film, Robot Dreams, are basically all the sort of side quests happening, or sort of these visions happening while they're separated, you know, like things they're imagining about one another, which are all sort of interesting and sort of...
I wasn't that keen on
I wouldn't say well animated,
yeah.
but like well sort of storyboarded and kind of devised. Like the imagination of those scenes is good and creativity is good, but yeah, the style is a bit cheap, a bit kind of homemade in like a not particularly pretty way. Naming your film after what in my mind are the asides to your character's kind of journey is a bit of a strange one.
Yeah, I thought it was certainly well. Like, there's funny bits in the film. I totally got the sort of melancholic angle it was going for, and like it kind of worked at points. But like, it's a film I will never return to. Essentially,
yeah. An oddity, an aside, a short film made long, and it feels. And we say that because it feels like it's just stretched. It doesn't feel like it justifies its length. You know what I'd have called this film? My Pet Robot.
I mean, that would make more sense.
Because it's a spin as well. Because he's a dog.
I like it. And I guess also if we're going by animation, it just had very bland animation to me. Like, it's a bit different, but
you know what it looked like
did look a bit cheap.
It looked like a lower rent version of Bob's Burgers because it had a very similar locale to Bob's Burgers, like on a beach with a pier.
You can accept it a bit more with a TV show.
Yeah, but I mean, not that you've seen it, but like the Bob's Burgers recently did their own movie, and it was like way higher rent than this.
Right. Okay.
So. Yeah,
there you are.
We're basically trundling down towards our least favourite of these, but we'll go down to Nimona, which I
hated it. I know. The thing is, I know I'm in the minority here because I've seen loads of people absolutely love this film, and I don't hold it against them. You know, my problem with Into the Spider-Verse, like the Across the Spider-Verse was like a good enough film that like even though I found the humour and like the hyperactivity of it annoying, I was like, it's a good enough film that it doesn't really bother me. I still think it's a good film.
Yeah.
This film was like, it was almost designed to annoy me, like in every way. Like it was almost like someone knew everything that would aggravate me. Like every joke, there was like, literally every joke in this film. There was not a single bit that made me laugh. Every joke like made me go, oh.
Yeah, is there a word? Is there a word for when something makes you anti-laugh?
Yeah, it's cringe. But like,
I think we need a specific word for the notion of like a joke so powerfully unfunny to what your own sensibilities that you actively become less happy.
Yeah, there's an interesting story behind this film because it was apparently a Netflix film or a Disney film or something. I think it was a Disney film. Yes. And basically they canned it. They didn't want it because it was being made by one of the fucking
No, that's what it was. It was a Blue Sky. It was the animation studios that did, I think, the Ice Age film.
Right, yeah.
It got acquired in a merger by potentially the Fox one.
Right.
And then, Disney were kind of like, can it? Like, it was one of those ones lost in limbo between the merger. And then someone was like, no, I'm passionate about this shit. We're going to find a way. And they did.
And look, I'm happy that it came out. I'm not happy that I had to see it because it was nominated for an Oscar for some reason. Another big thing is like the animation in this film is visibly unfinished.
Well, okay. This is you say unfinished, I say it's a clear stylistic choice. Now, if it looks unfinished, I don't disagree that
it can be both.
I don't think it's literally unfinished.
I think it is literally unfinished. I think it's literally unfinished, and what they've done is like, right, we don't have, and I understand why they've done it. In my mind, this is the storyline I've created, and therefore it is true.
Okay.
So in my head canon is clearly, so this film nearly got shelved and just binned. That's a bad thing. I want this film to come out. I want every film to come out. And clearly the money was running dry, but they're like, right, we can put this film out, we can fix up this and here, we can finish it up, but something's gonna have to be cut. Okay, so just whack a load of cell shading on it, hope for the best. The film comes out fuck ugly, which it did. Because what's interesting is there's actually a lot of quite good character animation in the film, as in the characters move in like quite humorous ways. There's like a lot of thought and effort that's gone into like the faces that they make, like the naturalistic sort. I don't know if there's like some mocap in it maybe, but like there's like the physics of it are like clearly like very comedically timed and worked out. But what's not finished is the textures and the shadows, because there are points in this film where you can kind of see it fucking up, and that's like more than one time, and it's like it's not like I'm looking for it. It's like I just see it, so it's quite bad. That's my headcanon. That's my truth.
Yeah, I just think that you hated the visuals of it, and I just think that's what they were going for. I think
can't believe that they would purposely make a film.
I think they were trying to ape the Sony stuff from Spider-Man and Puss in Boots: Last Wish type shit, and they just didn't do it as good. And they cocked it up.
I just don't believe they did it that much
I
worse.
believe that. I believe that way more than your weird bloody headcanon.
No, my headcanon is totally true, by the way. I think that's a very reasonable headcanon. Anything else to say about Nimona?
It's one of those weird ones where it's like a story about like sort of a distressed teen, like kind of coming to terms with their identity, and they basically commit like a mass atrocity. And then it's like, don't worry, it's okay, you committed that mass atrocity because you were misunderstood. And it's like, I feel like the message of your film is somewhat undercut by the fact that that person just went on a killing
it's the
rampage.
Zootopia problem, right? Because it's like, Zootopia has a very noble message about how racism is wrong, but in using the allegory it goes for, ends up kind of justifying racism in a way. It's like, but black people are viewed as, so like it makes the comparison of like, black people are like predators.
Which is like, already a bad start.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which is bad, right? So like that's a good criticism of Zootopia. It's like Zootopia is actually quite a good film, but the allegory
it falls
starts
apart.
in a bad place.
Do not scrutinise
Whereas
it at
in
all.
this one, what they're doing is like, this person is obviously a massive threat to civilization.
This person could become a kaiju.
Yeah, but like, and also like doesn't have total control, and the whole film spends loads of jokes about how like, I want to murder people in a way that's cute and funny, and it's like,
she actually does
gay
it.
people are like this dangerous demon.
Right.
It's like
we all have a demon inside of us that may level an entire city. Like what?
Yeah, it doesn't really work on that front. So it's like it kind of ends up inadvertently kind of justifying,
because it's what it is the problem of like the heightened nature of like the film. Like you have to raise the stakes, and for like the big bombastic film that it is, it needs like its big bombastic action filled ending, and then you have to tie that into the character's journey, and the character's journey is that she's like she meets her lowest point and then is raised back up, by the love of the people around her. So when you try and conflate those two things, you end up coming into these like weird cross sections where your motivations as a creative split basically in a way that can never be fully reconciled. You have to sacrifice one thing or the other and just cross fingers that no one was paying enough attention. And I think that's what's happened here. But speaking of a film that was flawed from its very core in such a way to make it one of the most unpleasant viewing experiences of the last year or two, we now move on to Elemental.
It's amazing that the worst film of last year was nominated for an Oscar.
We're talking about Zootopia. This is very much just Zootopia, but with a new coat of paint. Instead of cute animals who are, borderline furry bait, we have a bunch of different elements. Problem number one arises in the elements they've chosen to use, fire, air, water, earth. There's only 4 types. Boring. There's a whole city full of only 4 different kinds of people. Zootopia had all of the animals, all of the mammals you can think of in one city. That's great. There's all sorts of different areas of the city that cater to specific different animals. There's so much variety. There's so much
so many
interplay.
jokes you can tell.
Sure, the whole racism thing falls apart on its ass, but beyond that, you have like, the cute little mouse part of the city. The polar bears, they're all Russian. They live in the winter part of the city. It's fun. It's really creative and it's beautiful. Like this, it's like, you're a fire person or a water person. You live in the watery bit. You live in the airy bit. You live in like the fiery bit. You live in the creativity there is massively scaled back.
The problem with Elemental is it's a rare film where literally everything about it is really bad. So I don't really know. Like,
you want to stop me from breaking it apart?
No, it's in like
so much as I will be here forever.
No, we will both be here because we're both very much on the same page with this film. In that we both agree it's the worst film of last year, right?
Yes.
It's the worst Pixar film by a long way.
By a fucking country mile.
I know there was that other Disney film that came out this year that was apparently quite bad called Wish. I need to see that film because there's no way it's worse than this. And it's amazing that Disney just weren't even nominated this year outside of a Pixar film. It's like the least deserving Oscar. Because like we could go into like story, it's terrible. We could go into the animation, it's ugly.
Awful.
We could go into like the whole concept, it's terrible. The music is terrible.
The racism allegory.
The societal allegory and the themes, none of it makes sense. And probably similarly to Nimona and Zootopia, I think you can kind of argue like kind of ends up probably backing it up. I can't be asked to go into the themes and talk about why it doesn't work. It's like in this one, it's like Asian people are fire.
Yeah,
like, that's it. And what I can't.
But like, it's like, but why can't interracial marriages and relationships work? Because you'll kill each other, and then they just decide. They just decide it won't. Like, you will literally extinguish this woman. Yeah. They try and imply like fire and water are like fire and ice, where they can't meet that touch. Yeah. No, it's fire and water is a very different thing. In that water will extinguish.
The big problem with the film is like if you're gonna go for this bold, sweep concept, you have to stick to it. it, and the film just decides at multiple points this just can't be bothered because it gets in the way of the really shit story they're trying to tell. So with Zootopia and Nimona, they still mostly stick to like, here's a logic to the universe, like there are certain rules, and there are probably points where they like fuck up, but for the most part it's like we stick to it. Elemental just has a bit where they're like, yeah, like fuck it, not anymore. So it's like, well, if you can't be asked, why the fuck should I be asked? This film sucks.
Point one, they live in Element City.
Yeah.
They called it just Element City. Like, if there's anything to imply the laziness, like this was clearly...
And they're called like the fire people as well, right?
Yeah, water people and that. Yeah, no creative names there. This is literally slapped on the desk of some poor fucking like producer at the Pixar offices by the head honcho who goes, film about elements, write it, print it, let's go. Like, oh, we've done one about toys, we've done one about emotions, we've done one about this, we've done one about that, we've even done one about cars. Yeah. We've done a whole trilogy about cars. We've got to do one about fucking elements.
It's like a parody of the Pixar formula, but like it's even worse than whatever a parody could have been. Because also I guess one last thing, the guy who plays the water guy.
That was going to be my final point.
The worst performance of the year, like literally the single most annoying voice performance I've ever seen. I know the character's supposed to be annoying, but when a character is supposed to be annoying, you're not supposed to actually want to just like kill them.
Actually, like I've never had that in such a palpable way.
Like I often struggle to relate to people like Jeffrey Dahmer, but while watching Elemental, I can totally put myself in the place of like, yes, if I got the opportunity, I would dissect this person while they were still alive because they are them in a barrel. So annoying. If he was like, if I had the little water thing in my hand, I would like, right, where's an argon? I'm just gonna fucking shove him in there and hope for the best. Open it up and he can be converted into one of the fucking steam people. Fucking jarring. So annoying.
That's a fucking valid point.
Yeah, like what happens if you just boil the water people? Do they turn into air people?
Yeah, do they become air people? Holy shit. That's such a plot
also,
point.
they weren't Earth. They weren't Earth people, they were wood people.
Were they?
Yeah, so the elements in this film are fire, water, sea and wood. No, sorry. Fire, air, water. Wait, fire, air, water, wood.
I really want to see like the opening bits of the Avatar TV show. Fire, water, wood.
And it's just a kind of a stick.
Wood.
Yeah, so
Elemental sucks fucking dog balls.
Do not watch it if you haven't. So next up we have
Best Adapted Screenplay, for which we have Barbie, Oppenheimer, Poor Things, The Zone of Interest, and our winner, American Fiction.
I think Poor Things or The Zone of Interest. It's something like, what is an adapted screenplay? I think Oppenheimer should have won because I think it had the most complex story to adapt, and the way that Chris Nolan adapted that book, American Prometheus, into a film, it was an incredibly difficult thing to pull off. So I think that should have won. Is that what did I put?
Yes, you predicted Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
But you said your favourite was The Zone of Interest.
Yeah, and I don't know about the book The Zone of Interest, but Jonathan Glazer has a really interesting approach to adaptation where, from what I understand, The Zone of Interest is a much more involved character thing about Hearst and his family, and much like Under the Skin, where they take a book that has a lot of detail and then his adaptation strips it all
real
back
deconstructive shit.
I love that approach to adaptation, so that's probably
I fuck with that. My prediction was also Oppenheimer, and my favourite was Poor Things, in so much as I've already read the material. It's a rare occasion I have done that,
and you know how much of a good adaptation it is then.
And I can't think of any better way of recreating that story. It's even more vivid than what it was on the page.
Right.
So yeah, that was my pick. But American Fiction, I'm glad it won something, so not too displeased.
I'm not annoyed, but I think Oppenheimer should have won.
All good nominations there. I mean, I would have been a bit annoyed if Barbie had won, but again, what's it an adaptation?
It's not, but it's the stupid rules, so it's based on a thing. Dumb. It's stupid.
But Barbie was the least good option there, but still a good option, so I wouldn't have hated that. I guess we go now quickly on to Best Original Screenplay, for which we have The Holdovers, Maestro, May December, and Past Lives.
So May December, I'm not as mad about it as some people are, but I thought it was really good.
I thought it was good as well.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
It's as a screenplay, I will say the screenplay is phenomenal in terms of taking a really, really difficult subject and making a sort of drama really interesting, interpretive, sort of multi-character dynamic, and exploring that, like the dynamic between the three characters and what it reveals. There's some real difficult moments in that film that I think are not just from the screenplay, but as a whole. We're talking about the screenplay, so the performances are all great, but we won't go into that. I think maybe, I guess you could say Natalie Portman or Julianne Moore.
Oh, sure.
I forget the guy's name. He was amazing. I think they were
you know what?
potential snubs.
They should have, in terms of some of the ones that were up there,
Yeah, like get Jodie Foster and Annette Bening out of there.
Yeah, straight up,
so they were all snubbed, I think, potentially, but I think Anatomy of a Fool is a rightful winner. For me.
Yeah, I could have gone the Holdovers, but yeah, fuck it, Anatomy of a Fool. And I think I did, you went Anatomy of a Fool, so you're now winning. My favourite was the Holdovers, and I predicted Past Lives, so...
Okay.
I fucked up on both
Unlucky.
counts there. Yeah, quick note on May December is that it's kind of a little bit like the flipped, or not flipped, but a similar perspective on abuse and control and power and all these things. It was Poor Things, but in a much more real world, grounded setting.
Totally
Gender
different
flip,
approach to very similar
totally
themes,
different approach, and but like a very interesting exploration of that kind of dynamic and what it does to the people involved, how the sort of mental gymnastics involved with some of the people that have to kind of essentially fool themselves or Stockholm syndromed into a world that they don't realize they've been forced into. Like, the guy playing the young husband, so good,
really good.
And like, there's an amazing scene where he's sharing a joint with his own son.
Yeah, and he has a breakdown.
And there's this weird thing where he's like more emotionally immature than his own kid. Because he's just so stunted.
His whole life he's basically been like fucked, because he's like not grown up properly, right?
Yeah. He has this immense burden of responsibility as a young father, and yet he's
kind of infantile.
And he's kind of pulled in two different directions, where in some moments he is very mature, and in other moments he's like completely...
But he's kind of playing the role of the father rather than actually being able to like grow into that role.
It's such a fucking great character study of him, and Natalie Portman is really fascinating in it as well, because she
plays like quite a sort of like, you don't really know what her motivations are.
Yeah, for sure. And like she has like a sort of morbid fascination with it, which then sort of evolves into kind of almost partaking in it in its own way, which is really fascinating. I don't know, I haven't really fully unpicked that.
It's definitely a film that deserves a rewatch. So I think we can both say that it was snubbed actually a bit.
In terms of it deserving more nominations, 100%.
I just think, just a quick shout out to Anatomy of a Fool. I think the argument scene that they play in the court is like a really brilliantly written piece.
Wow.
In terms of like a climax for a film where you can sum up all of the film's conflict in a really meaningful and believable way in the film. It makes sense they would play that argument if they had a recording of it. Also, obviously it's phenomenally acted. I don't know the husband's name. He's actually really good in it.
He is very good.
I love how that plays out, and like that is a really brilliantly written bit. Yeah, just love that. And I also love the son and his speech after like he accidentally nearly kills the dog, and he's talking about that. That's a really, really beautifully written bit. So a deserving winner for me.
We now move on to Best Cinematography, for which we have nominated El Conde, Killers of the Flower Moon, Maestro, Poor Things, and Oppenheimer, which won. Now, El Conde is another new one here. A brief little breakdown of this one is it's a black and white film from...
I think it's Pablo Larraín or Lorraine.
Pablo Larraín. Where's it from? Is it Argentina?
Chile.
It's about General Pinochet, who is, in this sort of fictionalized version of history, is not dead, but is in fact a vampire, and is like living out the sort of twilight years of his life in a secluded family home, where basically a sort of feature-length episode of Succession takes place, where they're all trying to sort of...
His kids show up and they want his estate.
Yeah, they're all baying for his blood, ironically. And in what, to me, was like one of the greatest movie disappointments of the year, having watched the trailer and being so sold on the concept of like this evil dictatorial bastard being reimagined as a literal vampire, just sounded like such a gloriously...
It has all the ingredients to be a good film.
Like, it sounded like such a glorious concept for like a black comedy to be like, to really like explore his evil qualities in like a really kind of, bleakly comedic way. Instead, it's just actually an incredibly like vapid and empty film that doesn't really have a huge amount to say at all. And it's very...
It does have good cinematography.
It's got good cinematography, but it's very bland, very boring. The fact that it's aesthetically pleasing to look at is all it's really got going for it. So in that sense, it's on a similar level to Maestro.
I think all of these films are worth nominating in this category. I'm trying to think if anything's been snubbed here. What did we pick?
Well, you picked Poor Things for both your favourite and to win, and I picked Oppenheimer for both, and I won.
Okay,
tell you what, I swear down last year we got like 1 or 2 right.
Yeah.
This time we are.
We have like almost all of them right, at least one of us.
We're going so well.
I think Oppenheimer has amazing cinematography, so I'm totally not mad at it winning. And like I've already talked about the black and white and all of this stuff. It's absolutely gorgeous, wonderfully edited, blah 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 blah. Poor Things just has such a unique, fantastical, like gorgeous.
You know, I'm all on board with
We
that
don't need
shit.
to say much more, but I love the like fisheye lens and all this weird shit that Yorgos loves to do. So I think that probably should have won.
Yeah. To me, I think the reason I picked Oppenheimer over it is like the great balancing between like the black and white and the color sections and just. Nolan has such a wonderful eye for that sort of thing, and I guess in my mind it was a bit of a battle between those two films because I do fucking adore Poor Things, but I think what it was in my mind actually was that a lot of what I loved about Poor Things is to do with like design and set design and things like that, like and the cinematography, while great, I think much more of the visual language of Oppenheimer is done with the camera rather than with the sort of physical set designs. I think the balance, I mean, both are great at both, but I think the balance is slightly tilted to one.
I think Oppenheimer is a better prediction, to be fair.
So for best editing, we have Anatomy of a Fall, The Holdovers, Killers of the Flower Moon, Poor Things, and Oppenheimer. Which won again? You predicted Oppenheimer. I predicted Oppenheimer. We did it.
And the editing is basically a gargantuan task because you have the Nolan thing where basically 3 things are happening at the same time and you're cutting between them across different timelines and all this kind of stuff. There's a huge amount of stuff. The film, what I love about Oppenheimer, maybe why I find it so watchable, is it reminds me of Oliver Stone's JFK, which is like one of my sort of like favourite films. It has this like crazy expansive and it's full of like these montages of stuff happening. And I think the montage is one of the most amazing pieces of cinematic, like just things that kind of seems to have fallen out of trend in modern cinema. And I love that Oppenheimer uses it. Like there's so many in this film that I could point to. Like I love the opening one, the Can You Hear the Music one, where it's him sort of being tortured scientist, and you've got like this all these great shots of like particles and like explosives and blah blah blah. There's so many that you could point to throughout the film, but it's a worthy winner.
Best international feature film. We have Io Capitano, Perfect Days, Society of the Snow, The Teacher's Lounge, and the winner, The Zone of Interest. Now, quickly, we've talked about The Zone of Interest a lot already, and both of us predicted Zone of Interest. It was our favourite, it was the best, it's awesome. That said, all
of these films were good.
These are all good films, and if you are the sort of person that might sort of skip over Best International Film,
don't do it this year.
Stick around at least to just kind of get a cursory idea of how these films all play out.
Because they're very different as well. There's a really beautifully like diverse kind of film here.
For sure.
Io Capitano, I guess we start with that.
Yep.
Probably my least favourite of these, but still really good.
I'm with you there, yeah.
Immigrant story about, people immigrating from Senegal to Italy, right?
Yes.
2 debut acting performances from 2 really, really amazing actors.
100%, yeah.
Forget their names, but totally deserve props for that. Really well-made film. I think it kind of loses its way a little bit in the second half.
Yes. So yeah, it's a very harrowing portrayal of the journey that people have to make if they want to sort of leave their country and travel to Europe, in the idea of making it and being able to bring money back for their family and helping them live a better life than the one they have, and the horrifying hurdles that they have to go through because with basically human trafficking and like the only way to
slavery
is to get exploited horribly on that journey. This echoes a great documentary we saw saw on YouTube about the MMA fighter Francis Ngannou, which we will link down below actually, because it's a fascinating video. And I remember we both watched it together and were thinking, this guy's life story is amazing. It's
a movie.
It is a movie, and we were like, we should make that film. No sooner did we think it than this film comes out, and we're like, great, okay. So and it actually does follow that pretty solidly, apart from a few details. It's a film about sort of brotherly bond. There's a great moment that I love. There's this bit where he kind of meets this sort of paternal figure in his life, and then sort of sacrifices that in order to, with this vain hope of sort of being reunited with his friend. That genuinely nearly made me tear up.
It is a really like it has really beautiful moments in it, and what I really enjoyed as well is like I really enjoyed the almost kind of educational aspect of it, of like all the minutiae of the stuff that they have to do, like, oh, you got to make your water, and you got to hide your money up your arse, and you got to, and then, you know, this whole these kind of problems that you just never think about, because, you know, we live, you know, we haven't ever suffered like genuinely
blessed lives. We really do.
So it really, like, it was elucidating in that way, and I thought, really good. I think it kind of falls apart when it's like trying to go in this more abstract direction, or I don't think the ending really sticks.
Well, basically, it ends with them sort of all on a boat. On their sort of final leg of the journey, and it kind of loses momentum really, and it loses a sense of sort of differentiation, in that you spend time in this one place and it just kind of feels like it lingers and kind of repeats similar things. It's not that it isn't an important moment, it's just that it's not as interesting, or kind of, it doesn't really drive forward in the way that you would hope. But we'll move on to Perfect Days. Now, if you're talking about a film that drives forward, this is the antithesis of such a thing.
I mean, this is so definitely the sort of quiet cinema genre, slow cinema. I wouldn't call it mumblecore or anything like that, because it's not.
Well, no one fucking talks in it, so
yeah, the main character, so I forget the guy's name, but he's a fantastic actor. It's Wim Wenders, who is a legendary director of Paris, Texas, doing his new film, obviously set in Japan, about a guy who cleans toilets and lives a very simple, humble life, and just kind of, the film just kind of follows his daily routine. It's kind of like mundane. People come into his life and you kind of learn more about him, and it never really goes into detail about like why or how he got into this situation, but you can kind of infer things from like his performance, and his character has increasing layers of complexity. And I don't actually really have a lot to say about it, other than I just thought it was, for one of those quiet films, exceptionally well made and well acted, and I kind of just loved it. And those kind of films can be really hit or miss for me. So I thought it was kind of almost like one of the best versions of that I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, I kind of realised about an hour into it, was like, oh, this is the film. Yeah. It's not changing. It's not, this isn't the setup. For people, I'm not huge into these kinds of films. I don't think I enjoyed this as much as you, but I really did get that. At first I was like, it was a bit patience testing, but the more it went on, the more you kind of, the film has more to say than you think it does, and you kind of have to let it happen. Yeah,
there's like a scene towards the end that really kind of drives home. Ultimately, the film's message is really simple. It's just about like, just try and enjoy your life. That's kind of like the message of the film. It's like, you know, you're lucky to be able to do that compared to other people who can't, or know that they're on borrowed time, when technically we all are. Which is that, like, obviously it's a very sort of generic sentiment, but the way it delivers it, I think, is really unique. It's incredibly similar to a Jim Jarmusch, is that how you say his name?
Jarmusch.
Jim Jarmusch film called Patterson with Adam Driver,
okay.
Which I watched ages ago and didn't really rate, but I think I might have a newfound appreciation for that kind of thing. It's a really highly rated film, Patterson.
Yes, I've been meaning to see that. I mean, if you are the sort of person that really hates this kind of patience testing, kind of slow cinema, I wouldn't recommend this. But if you are,
it's not overly long, but
no, it's not overly long, but you know,
great
you
soundtrack.
Are essentially sitting down. Yes, great soundtrack. Man's got taste.
Classic rock.
Yeah, man. If you kind of just want to feel like you were living in another man's shoes, if you just kind of want to experience like the ambient noise of Tokyo, it's kind of that. It has a real profound beauty to it, but you just have to know what you're getting yourself in for. And big shout out to the main actor, who is in my favourite film of all time, Cure. Love him.
He's just such an expressive face.
He's
and he carries his film.
I need to see more of his stuff.
His face alone, like just the micro expressions and everything, like he brings so much. He has like even just like his eyes. I just think
Get him
man.
in Best Actor nomination instead of fucking Bradley Cooper
Yeah,
hamming it
straight
up.
up. Yeah, he totally would have deserved that.
With his silly accent, doing all sorts of nonsense. But yeah, okay, so we now move on to Society of the Snow.
Directed by J.A. Bayona.
Directed by J.A. Bayona, who did my favourite Jurassic World film, Fallen Kingdom, which is one of my favourite bad films of all time. I love that film. It is high quality schlock.
Yeah.
But you would never have anticipated, or at least I wouldn't have, that that man would then go on to make a really powerful and excellently made film about the alive story of the Chilean rugby team.
When I heard that this film was a Netflix film by J.A. Bayona and people were like, oh, it's really good, I was like,
nope.
No, it's gonna be fucking shit. Like, this was genuinely fucking great. Like, so good. It's kind of exactly what you'd expect in, like, if you know the story of Alive, if you know the story about the Uruguayan rugby team that crashed in the Andes, like, it is just that story. But basically, it just doesn't hold back any punches in telling that story. It shows you exactly how much it fucking sucked. It really goes into the detail about how these people had to survive, the things they have to do, the things that they had to come up against. Those kind of films about, like, human resilience, isn't it amazing that someone's able to do this? Like, kind of like NYAD, right? Like, these films can be really wrote and, like, fucking by the books and, like, oh, we get it. This film, I think, just, number one, it's visually incredible. J.A. Bayona, for the uninitiated, is like a very, very visually talented director, works with cinematographers or whatever. Like he did this one cinematography for that Lord of the Rings show. He did the cinematography in the Jurassic Park films, quite good. He did a film called The Impossible about the tsunami, which is a similar kind of disaster film. He did a really good horror film called The Orphanage. That was one of his first films. And he did a Monster Calls, which is like another big sort of visually opulent, like trauma film. I find his films are generally very overly sentimental, but really beautiful, whereas this balances that, like, completely perfectly. Sure. And yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, it's got a very good balance. It is very visceral. Like,
you see people eating human meat a lot.
Yeah. You get all that. You get people, like, you know, being buried alive in avalanches. You get people. You see, like, a very uncensored version of the plane crash. Yeah. Is very. I would love to see the 90s film. Was it the 90s or 80s?
Yeah, 90s.
The Alive.
Apparently it's not as good.
Yes, but I'd love to see that for a point of comparison, because I can only assume that this is much more visceral and bare in terms of, like, showing all of it. Like,
the acting was great as well. Like, it was probably melodramatic, but it totally works.
Yeah. And I will allow you melodrama when
you're in that fucked up situation.
Dying in the Andes, having to eat your friends. Yeah. Like, even though you kind of know where the story's going because of the history of it, it still is incredibly tense, and, like, each expedition they make feels so, like,
perilous.
Yes. Yeah. So it manages its atmosphere and its pacing incredibly effectively. I'd say a must-watch film from this, like, last year for sure. Yeah. And then finally, we'll talk about The Teacher's Lounge. This is a much quieter film again, but it's kind of about someone's life just kind of going a bit fucking wrong. Yeah. Themes of isolation and feeling like you're trying to do the right thing, and every possible turn
just goes wrong. Yeah.
You're constantly, like, and essentially one mistake spiraling and snowballing into this huge, enormous problem where you feel like you've completely lost grip of control.
And, like, a totally understandable mistake.
A completely understandable mistake. Basically, the thing is,
someone's nicking shit.
Someone's stealing things in the teacher's lounge, and our protagonist is a young female teacher who's like, fuck it, I'm going to take it into my own hands. One thing they're doing in the school is they're kind of sort of taking select pupils out to, like, essentially interrogate them, like, why you had this amount of money in your wallet? That's a bit unusual. People start assuming race is playing a part of it. Like, there's a big Turkish population in Germany, and one of the kids that gets called out is a Turkish kid, and it's like, why
were we first on the list?
Yeah, exactly, that sort of stuff. So she's like, oh, someone stole something from me in the teacher's lounge. Well, it must have been a teacher. I'm gonna start recording on my laptop, leave it running. She films someone, she then accuses the person she thinks did it, and then everything spirals out of control. And I found this powerfully affecting. It was so stressful. I hate films like this, but I loved it. Like, I loved how much I hated it, if you know what I mean. I don't deal with stress very well. And this was just my fucking kryptonite.
Yeah, it is like, there are scenes like the Teacher's Day or Parents' Evening.
The Parents' Evening. Fucking
like,
Christ.
there are some scenes in it, like the main actress in this, I don't know her name, is like amazing in this film. She's so good.
Yeah.
All of the acting is fantastic. The kid performances are all fantastic, as you often get with these foreign films where they actually hire actors based on merit and not because of how cute they are. Like, all of the kid actors were great. Everything was really believable. I loved the naturalistic tone of it. Basically, I loved everything in it. My main critiques were, I don't think the music in it was very good, and there were certain scenes where I really felt like it was being overused and was kind of grating.
Okay.
And there's like a couple of moments of like abstraction that totally didn't work for me, like the scene where like she's walking around and everyone's wearing the blouse. I was like,
I can see that. It's a little,
like, okay, right.
A little bit.
It's like the most obvious thing.
Yes,
you can do,
yes, sure. Okay, that's fine.
Just a little eye rolling, but like overall, a really, really well made film. And I guess I wasn't totally big on the ending. I get it.
No, I really liked the ending. I thought because it was that kind of a great version of the ending where nothing is really resolved, but you've done a little thing to make someone's day a bit better.
Yeah, I got that. Yeah, but it felt like. And I'm not asking for them to like remove the ambiguity. Or
I know. You
know. But I think it kind of just felt like it could have been a little bit longer. Expand upon that a bit more, get a bit, just like the tiniest bit more resolution. Exactly, yeah. Not necessarily resolution, but you get the ending for the kid character, but I don't know if you really necessarily got it for the main character.
Fully with you on that. Yeah. No, I feel you on that.
So, but it's still a great film in its own way, and really well made, really well directed as well.
I guess in a year where Zone of Interest isn't there, I'd have been happy with Society of the Snow or Teacher's Lounge winning. But
for me, it would have been Society of Snow or Perfect Days. But I mean, Zone of Interest clears them, easily. Unfortunately.
Yeah, which is a weird one. Just a brief aside is that it's a international film, United Kingdom, which
first one that's ever won.
Well, from the UK, which is interesting because I just didn't
never
consider.
Thought about it that way, yeah.
I mean, obviously I know we're not America, but like I guess I've always associated it with English language and like international being sort of shorthand for stuff that's not in English.
Yeah.
And Zone of Interest isn't in English.
Well, it's a bizarre cocktail because it's English in that it's funded by the English
and made by an
Englishman, but it's also shot entirely in Poland and entirely spoken in German.
Yes.
So
yeah,
it's bizarre on that front.
It's an interesting one, yeah. So, but yeah, beyond all of that, definitely deserving winner.
Right.
We're going to bomb through these last two very quickly because we've already wasted enough of your time and you've already clicked off this video. So we're now doing Best Original Score, which was American Fiction, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, Killers of the Flower Moon, Oppenheimer, which won, and Poor Things.
The winner was Oppenheimer. I think I predicted Oppenheimer, and Oppenheimer would have been my pick because I think that score...
My prediction was also Oppenheimer, but my favourite was Poor Things, but again, it could have been between the two. I know you fucking adored the soundtrack for this. You've been listening to it all the time. I keep seeing it pop up on Apple Music. What your friends are listening to? Oh, it's still the Oppenheimer soundtrack, is it?
It's great working music. It makes whatever... I'm replying to emails, I'm like, fucking hell, I'm like a physicist.
Was it Ludwig Göransson?
Yeah.
He's fucking awesome. He also pissed everyone off by saying, I'm glad my parents didn't make me play video games.
He was right!
But it's like, yeah, dude is an Oscar winning. It's like, just
are you telling me...
Get a fucking grip. People are allowed to criticise something you like without your entire world shattering into a million pieces, you fucking cretins. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny doesn't really deserve to be there because it's...
And neither does American Fiction.
I don't remember a single thing about that soundtrack. Indiana Jones, it's all based off of previously existing soundtrack stuff, all the best parts of the soundtrack.
You could have literally taken another Indiana Jones film and just used the music from that and no one would
I wouldn't have fucking noticed. So yeah, I think, giving John Williams another nomination, fine, happy for him, but he is just recycling his old work.
And it's not deserving.
No. And then finally, we go on to Best Sound, which we had The Creator, Maestro, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, Oppenheimer, and then the winner, The Zone of Interest. We will not bore you by going into The Creator or Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1.
They're both fine.
When it comes to sound, there was only one correct fucking answer.
Yeah.
If this didn't win, we would have cooed.
A Zone of Interest, like the sound is literally one of the.
It's a character.
It's like again, I'm just gonna stop quoting the fucking crew of the film, but they said, the zone of interest, the film is almost secondary to the film that is happening off screen. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And the sound paints that picture. I don't know if we didn't even really go into this when we talked about the zone of interest, but whenever people are just going around doing their daily life shit, you can just hear stuff happening. You can hear screams. There's one shot in the film where you're actually even slightly close to it. And it's just a shot of Hearst's face and there's like a bunch of smoke and stuff.
Yes.
And you can hear some really fucked up shit going on. And the fact that you can't hear it and you can't see it makes it genuinely like a really chilling moment. And there's like scenes where they're just walking around the garden and you can just hear people being executed, or you can hear people screaming or shouting. And you don't know what it is. You just hear something and your mind is immediately like, what is that? Because we as humans are kind of, we're programmed to try and make sense of these things.
Yeah.
It's one of the most amazing uses of sound. And it works so, but it's all so technically well executed as well. It sounds so real.
It was painstakingly done and amazingly executed, and maybe some of the best sound work in film fucking history, let alone this year. But weirdly, I predicted that Oppenheimer would win, just because I thought the Oppenheimer sweep was coming for sound. So we drew.
Yes! I clawed it back at the end because I think I won the last video.
Yes.
Yeah. So, alright, okay, cool.
You are still in the lead.
Yeah,
your record is not
well
yet
played,
blemished.
well played.
Good game. Good game.
GG. Oh,
so,
beautiful.
Long fucking last, this video is over and you can turn us off because I know you've been so loyal in watching us to this point. Thank you very much for watching what is undoubtedly the definitive Oscars 2024 video. If you watch any other videos about the Oscars, frankly, you're doing yourself a disservice because you're not coming to the people with the correct knowledge to fully equip you with your own knowledge. I've been Adam.
I've been Rupert.
And we'll catch you again next time. Peace out.
Peace.